Good morning, everybody. My name is Nondutsugo Mhlungwe, and welcome to InsureTalk20, the second edition this year. Well, with the second quarter of the year about to commence, what a better time to introduce the risk topic to the conversation. This is, of course, a topic that will always be relevant and one that is pervasive across most, if not all, industry sectors. Speaking of which, this is the agenda and speaker lineup that you can look forward to today. This is what our speakers will be sharing in the course of today's session. All right, well, a huge thank you to all of our sponsors without whom the session would not be possible. A huge shout out to Easy Equities, who are the headline sponsors today, as well as our event partners that include the IISA, who are also assisting with the accreditation of today's session for 2.5 CPD hours, as well as Cover Magazine coming in as our media partner. All right, without wasting any more time, let's jump right into our very first speaker of the day. He goes by the name of Carl Nolter. Carl is an executive at Easy Equities. He's going to be talking to us today about risk, compliance, and Easy Equities. Over to you, Carl.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks very much for that introduction, Noni. It's always a hard act to follow after you. It makes one very nervous, and particularly because my topic sounds so boring. So I assure everybody that that's not actually what I'm going to be talking about this morning. And I'm going to keep you only for 5 minutes. I joined insurance 22 years ago, and I took a bit of a risk doing so, as I think many people on the call or this Zoom chat today did as well. I was offered a job at a big bank and at a small insurance company, and I took the risk of joining the insurance company. And that path led me to Easy Equities. And I'm deeply grateful for that journey, because there's such a strong convergence between insurance and between investment. There's a 30% shareholder in Easy Equities, and that is an insurer. Sanlam owns 30% of Easy Equities. And Easy Equities is launching an insurance product, our first life product, and that's happening in the next couple of months. One of our shareholders, Base Capital, has also invested in a number of other financial services companies, including insurance-related ones like Root. And so for me, I'm really passionate about investment and about insurance. Insurance has been the bedrock and remains the bedrock of society. And I think everybody on this call can be really proud of what they do and what they contribute to the world, to society. Because without insurance, I don't think anything's possible. And for me, Easy Equities plays a complementary role to that, and platforms like Easy Equities, because it gives people financial freedom and financial dignity. It allows people to see the possibilities of what they can do. And so it's a great honor to chat to you this morning, particularly on a topic like risk. We're going to hear from some traditional risk speakers, like the guys from Imsa, Michael, Nicola, who has won numerous awards in the risk space and currently is, amongst others, the Chief Risk Officer at the JSE. And I'm delighted to say that she's going to be taking over from me and doing a much better job in compliance when she joins Easy Equities on the 1st of June as Chief Risk Officer, and a number of other roles, including some strategy and other elements. But you're going to hear from speakers that aren't in the traditional risk space. People like Boyke, who's written a book on Bitcoin, who had a traditional career and then has done a whole bunch of other stuff, taken a risk. You're going to hear from Alan and Ricky from C Results. People who've, Alan's left a traditional career to follow his passion, taken a risk. Ricky's a professional boxer. That's, often involves risk. You can hear from Tony McCann, a young, phenomenal woman who does amazing things within the trail running space. And so for me, what do all these people share? They share a belief that not taking risk is often risky. And it's one of the great lessons that I've learned from the CEO at Easy Equities, Charles Savage, in my personal life, but also in investment and in business, is you need to take risk. That's not risky. In fact, if you don't, it's often problematic. And so I'd like to encourage everybody on the call this morning to take risk, lots of risk. And specifically, I'd like to encourage you to take the risk to believe in a world that can be better than the one we currently have. I want to encourage you to take a risk to believe in yourself. I want to encourage you to take a risk to not be cynical. And I read this morning in the Financial Mail a great piece from Herman Bosman, who's the head of RMI, that many of you would have seen are doing this not reverse listing, but delisting, and OUTsurance will be listed. So a fantastic opportunity for an insurer to be listed on the stock exchange. And Herman talks about what were the decision elements for that. And he speaks about there are lots of data points, but at the end, it's going with your gut. And so for me, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book, Blink, which has a similar theme. We have so many different experiences. Go with your gut, take the risk. Take the risk to believe that the diversity is better. My latest risk has been to, or latest risk that I've taken is to be a co-founder and investor in a new insurance business called Ami. It's majority women-owned and operated, and I'm very excited by what this new UMA is going to bring to the insurance landscape. And it wasn't such a big risk because I'm doing it with a partner well known to many of the people here, Christelle Coleman, and as one of the top, in bias as I am, the top underwriter in the country, it's not such a big risk. And so if you're holding back on stuff, I hope today's session encourages you to take lots of risk, to have lots of fun, to contribute. And so Nonnie and everybody from InsureTalk, thank you very much for the opportunity for Easy Equities to be your partner in today's session. We're really proud about it. We hope you enjoyed today's session and take a hell of a lot of risk and have fun while doing so. Back to you, Nonnie.
Thank you so much, Carl, for setting the scene so beautifully around today's very important topic. I do look forward to the rest of the insights that will be shared by our speakers today. All right, on to our next speaker now. He goes by the name of Michael Davies. Michael is the project lead at Imsa. Michael is going to be unpacking the 2022 Imsa risk report. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Nadia. And I'd like us to take up the challenge by Carl about taking more risks. So I think it's great that I'm in the position to start this morning's session, just in that I'm going to be talking about risks that we all face as South Africans. The Institute for Risk Management South Africa publishes an annual risk report, South Africa Risks, and this was recently released. The risk report for 2022 was released in February, and it's my privilege this morning to discuss that and highlight some of the findings of the risk report. I was the project lead, so I was very involved in the whole process, and I have a presentation which I'll start now, and we can go through the various risks. Right, currently sharing. And I'm hoping that that's all good. Right, so in terms of the risk report, this is the 8th edition. And as I
sorry,
mentioned,
Michael, could you just swap your display?
Yes, thanks. I'm just not seeing that bar.
Just hold the Zoom icon and move it out of your way.
Just one sec.
The bar that's blocking.
Perfect. I'm hoping that's corrected it.
Perfect, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So as I said, this is the 8th edition, and a little around the risk report. It is specific to South Africa. It is also highlighting top risks to the achievement of the National Development Plan and the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, which is an interim, call it booster plan to get to the NDP Vision 2030. So the report is built around and focusing on the top risks in South Africa. But it's really important as well to understand the risk context for South Africa, and then also scenarios. Futurists love the multiple futures, the various scenarios that can be in there, and a discussion around that. And it is really important to understand the top risks in context of that. In terms of how the risk report was constructed, we had a lot of intelligence into the report. The existing Imsa Risk Intelligence Committee is very involved in it. There was a separate and dedicated project working group on the risk report, which took about 6 months in putting together. And it's always a fine balance between, how long do you put together a team to work on it in terms of how recent is the information which you're sharing. Now, I'm very comfortable that the information shared is very relevant to everybody in South Africa and for the year ahead. A risk survey was shared, to which we had 633 respondents. In the risk report, we have 24 industry leaders, whether that's political commentators, leaders from the private sector or public sector, and subject matter experts that have contributed to putting all this information together. And I'm glad to say that we had representation and response from all 9 provinces of South Africa, plus 8 other countries, as we have Imsa members in other countries, and we got input from Eswatini, Ghana, Lesotho, Madagascar, Malawi, Namibia, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe. And in terms of industries, there were more than 14 different industries. The response was fairly evenly split between public sector and private sector, with some responses from the academic and professional bodies as well. So I believe it's a nice balanced report in terms of input, and also quite wide, so it covers a number of bases. Should you have had the opportunity to have read the report by now, you will see that this will be familiar to you. The sections are broken down into, firstly, the risk context for South Africa, and it's how do we build a better South Africa in the context that we are living in. The second section is regarding scenarios, and more importantly is how do we influence the future through better risk management. Section 3 is which section we'll focus on today, and it then is the top risks South Africa faces. And again, just to reiterate, it's top risks we face in terms of achievement of the NDP and ERP for the country. And the last section is around skills and competencies which we require urgently to address the risks. So just in terms of the risk context for South Africa, some of the topics that were highlighted in this section were the stunted prospects for GDP growth. So we've got the protracted impact of COVID and the pandemic. We still have state capture issues lingering. We have high employment rates, and these were highlighted under this topic. Then we have the geopolitical tensions compounded by local political uncertainty. So at the time of writing is the geopolitical tensions were around the US-China trade and tariff wars, which more recently, the headline is really around the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the impacts of that. Bearing in mind then the local political uncertainty. We've recently had the local government elections at the end of last June, and it's still yet to be seen as to how the coalitions work together. Do they deliver? Will there be sabotage within these coalitions? There were a couple of surprises for the ANC during those elections. And so there's a fair amount of local political uncertainty going forward. also compounded then by South Africa's stance on the situation in Ukraine. Then another hot topic is the impact on social cohesion. Why is it a hot topic? The July 21 unrest incident is still fairly raw and in our memories. So in terms of the social cohesion discussion around inequality, South Africa has one of the highest Gini coefficients of inequality in the world. There's poor service delivery, again, unemployment, all of these things lead towards social discontent and a break in that social cohesion. Also exacerbated by trust in government, so the civil society and the social compact with government has an impact. Then in terms of supply chain disruptions and localization opportunities, there were numerous supply chain disruptions caused by the pandemic. There were travel restrictions, and that led to some innovation and ingenuity and opportunity. There's the opportunity of pursuing the African Free Trade Agreement, and that is then having better trade within the African continent, but also within South Africa. There's opportunity for being more self-sufficient in terms of our country and supplying more of our own local product. Cyber threats, again, seems to be a ever-present topic and area of risk, and obviously the work from home and the digital transformation to enable work from home has created some vulnerabilities for hacking and cyber breaches. So cyber threats is part of the discussion as well. And in terms of everything that we go through, disruption, in adversity, there was opportunities through this. And we're looking then at the opportunities of, well, if there's changes in supply chain, how can we improve the situation? What are the opportunities? Where's the innovation in that? In terms of the hybrid work from home situation, there's a lot we can do there as well. And then the rise of ESG, so environmental, social, and governance, predominantly focusing on climate risk. A lot of the risks talks around social and governance, but that's quite a hot topic as well. And then the critical importance of strategic foresight. And that's an observation made by many industry leaders, is that executives and management are spending so much time on day-to-day matters. We deal in continual disruption, and there's a lack of that strategic foresight. So if you get a chance to go through the report, if you have not already, you'll notice as well that from these industry leaders, there's a click your icon, which is a great little feature, because you click on that and you get to see the interview with that specific industry leader. So that's quite a nice context into where do these risks come from that we're about to speak of, and what's the impact thereof. Another important element in section 2 is the scenarios, so future scenarios. We have futurists such as Clem Santner, amongst many others, and Imsa looks at their own scenarios as well. And they have 3 scenarios, which are then explained in greater detail in the report. But the 3 scenarios being perpetual hangover, fake it until we make it or not, and own in our future. And just to briefly touch on this before we get into the risks. So the perpetual hangover is all about being short-sighted. It's about short-term gains. We continue to pursue individual gain as opposed to a common cause, and that leads ultimately to a failed state or complete economic collapse. In terms of the scenario of fake it until we make it, we understand the issues. We know there are some tough calls to be made, of which some are made. However, we still don't have a total common cause, and there's still an elephant in the room which is not resolved. So it's a here, there, or everywhere kind of scenario where there's some good parts to it, but unfortunately, overall, we're not achieving, and we're not going to achieve the objectives of the NDP and ERP. The favored scenario, one that we should all be directing our energies to as South African citizens and companies, is the own in our future. Here, we take the tough calls. We do find common ground in terms of our national consensus going forward. And we achieve this through all sectors of our economy. And there's a good public-private partnership system to get there. So those are three scenarios that have been a view taken by Imsa. And as I say in the report, they describe in a lot more detail. Now, in terms of scenarios and understanding which way are we going, futurists always look towards flags as to are we taking the high road, the low road, are we owning our future, are we in perpetual hangover? So some of the flags that we've considered to watch out for over time, and bear in mind flags are a point in time and they move. There's these fluctuations in if they are veering off, it obviously leads towards a perpetual hangover, and if we're getting things right, we're in our future. So in terms of leadership, are we making those tough calls? Do we have decisive, good leadership? And this becomes a very subjective view as well. There's the politics flag. I mentioned a little bit earlier. We do have coalitions going forward. There's a bit of uncertainty. Are they going to make the right calls? Is there sabotage within coalitions? We'll watch this politics flag. National policy. Some of the hot topics would be the expropriation without compensation of land, the national health insurance, and a number of other policies coming through. And are these good for the country? Equality, I mentioned that we have one of the highest Gini coefficients in terms of inequality. So do we improve our situation? That's a flag to watch. Global trends, does South Africa buck the global trends that are in various sectors? Or are we part of the global village going forward? Institutional capacity, very important. We may have the right national policies in place, but do we have the capacity to execute on those policies? So do we have that institutional capacity? Social cohesion, spoken of that, is that divide growing, or are we coming together to build a better South Africa? Service delivery, always on our minds in terms of municipalities, in terms of energy, water. Is our service delivery getting better or worse? That's a flag to follow. And a lot of them have an impact on the economy. So is our gross domestic product improving? And so is our GDP moving in the direction to own our future? Or are all these other challenges hampering the economy? And then climate change. Climate change is an important one because we have more immediate risks to focus on, but climate change is growing as a global risk of which action has been taken against. And again, in terms of global trends, are we going to take climate change seriously, or are we going to focus on more immediate problems? So ultimately, when watching those flags and taking the scenarios into account, is where will we be if the risks we're about to discuss materialize is into that perpetual hangover? We might get a couple of things right, but largely we'll be in the red, and unfortunately we'll be in perpetual hangover. Where do we think we are now from Imsa perspective and the risks that we've reviewed is we're definitely doing some things right. However, we've still got a lot of work to do, and there are certain areas that are there or thereabouts. So the policy might be in place, but the execution is lacking. So we tend to think we're in the fact that we make it or not scenario at the moment. And obviously, where do we want to be? If we manage to rise to the challenge of these risks and manage to correct a lot of the issues that South Africa is facing as a country, then we'll be where we want to be in terms of owning our future. So that's the scenario, planning around it, discuss the South African context. So what are the risks? What are the top risks as identified by Imsa with subject matter experts and industry leaders? These are the risks. So when you see the risks, you'll notice that they're not necessarily new. However, they have escalated. These risks have moved more into the red than before, and there's an urgency required in terms of solving these risks. And again, the challenge of these risks is if this risk materializes, it has an impact on us achieving our objectives in terms of the NDP and ERP. So another important thing, these top 9 risks, they're not prioritized in any certain order. These are top 9 risks facing South Africa. So if we look at state capture, if we look at the risk of South Africa becomes a failed state, the challenges that we have to face are the state capture, the lack of inclusive social economic growth, the exceptionally high rates of unemployment that South Africa is facing, the lack of access to reliable energy and other resources that businesses need, that individuals need, and the lack of government capacity. These are challenges that, if not resolved, result in that risk materializing. The next risk that we may materialize is the complete breakdown of ethical and legal principles across society. South Africans' tolerance of breaches of ethical standards and principles is concerning. If you consider members or citizens of society, the police force, the number of stories around bribes to avoid fines and things like that, our tolerance of low ethical standards is endemic through society, and that's something that we have to change. Tied to this is the accountability mechanisms. It's a challenge. We don't have the correct accountability mechanisms for those doing wrong. Are they being called out, and are they being called to account for it? Our leadership commitment remains a challenge as well. And if unethical and illegal practices continue in South Africa, it scares away foreign investment, which we would love to have, which would help some of the other risks in terms of economy. The next risk listed as a top risk to South Africa is the unmanageable societal unrest and breakdown of the rule of law. In this case, one of our challenges is that our economically inactive part of the population is growing, and does the rest of society have the ability to fund that growing proportion of economically inactive people? Our policy and regulatory uncertainty around things is a challenge, and our lack of trust in government, poor service delivery, and also poor education outcomes are all challenges to this risk materializing. Complete economic collapse as a risk. I speak a little bit more of it, but essentially, if this materializes, we spiral into poverty and debt, which will take a very long time to recover from. The lack of skills to enable economic growth and recovery is, again, around education, misaligned curricula. These are the challenges that we face. There's national issues around this. And also, are we educating for the skills that are demanded in occupations? Do we have that match or not? The next risk is the large-scale disruption of economic activity relying on stable supply of utilities. Again, talking around load shedding and also water resources. How many water outages do we have? How many power outages? Not only does that affect us as individuals, but as businesses, that has impact, and it is at risk. Then the large-scale interruption of digitally enabled services and economic activity around cyber. As I mentioned, cyber will always be there. And our challenges in South Africa is the lack of innovation, the digital transformation, the support to grow those skills necessary within the country. The debilitating loss of trade benefits through South African ports into Africa is In a recent report, the Durban Harbour was rated as 349th out of 351 ports in terms of efficiency. Our claim to gateway to Africa is definitely at risk. Transnet experienced a cyber breach which hampered their port activities. In order to alleviate or avoid this risk, we've got to get those fundamentals right. And then the last risk of top 9 listed was the inadequate response to current and future climate change impacts. And again, the world is raising or escalating the concern and activities around global change, climate change. And are we getting left behind because we're looking at more immediate risks? So those are the main risks. What's really important to understand as well is these risks are interdependent. So if we don't get the education right, and if we don't enable economic activity, these are risks that then lead to complete breakdown of ethical and legal principles and manageable societal unrest, and into potentially a complete economic collapse or failed state. And I've just sidelined the inadequate response to climate change, but it's something that's grown for us all the time, which is obviously it's going to raise its priority in terms of risks that we need to address. But from this it's quite clearly seen that all these risks have an interrelation and have a dependency on each other. And so if we get some key risks sorted in terms of removing the challenges, it will have a positive impact on the others. So just very quickly on complete economic collapse, what does it mean to us as a country? Obviously, it's the economic contraction, but it includes the high bankruptcy rates of organizations and an increasing high rate of unemployment, something that we are really trying to avoid. So what are these challenges to the risk of economic collapse? So if there's continued state capture, if the execution failures in policy reform, systemic fraud and corruption continues, public services failure, and then of great concern is failing state-owned companies and state-owned enterprises, and then the poor education outcomes. This leads to GDP deteriorating over time and goes into that spiral where poverty and debt is hanging over the country. In terms of failed state, while doing the report, it was quite interesting because there were certain commentators who would say we are in a failed state. And these are the reasons why I said we would be in a failed state is the state capture continues, there's lack of decisive action by leaders, continued lack of inclusive socio-economic growth, our energy supply is still at risk, there's a lack of government capacity to deal with certain things, and we still have the high unemployment, which are reasons why they say we're in a failed state. And they say that risk has actually materialized. The argument against is we do have Chapter 9 institutions in place, which are independent, such as the ISC, the South African Human Rights Commission, Auditor General, keeping the checks and balances in place. We still have an independent judicial system, revenue service, and Zonda Commission has done the state capture report. Now, it remains to be seen on the execution and the actions from it, but it's been done, and it is now about execution of findings. And then we do have pockets of excellence, which we shouldn't forget. Just a quick note on the report is I've said a lot about maybe the risk and the downside, but it's important to note there are success stories as well. And this slide just summarizes what we do with each of these top risks. We look at it in terms of the flag, so from a scenario perspective, we have success stories, we look at the challenges to this risk materializing, and we also have treatment options and opportunities, which is the positive side of moving this forward. So at a high level, without going into each risk and responding to each one, but at a high level, in order for South Africa to move forward, is we need to implement proper consequence management. Where there's wrongdoing, it needs to be brought to account. We need to implement effective control frameworks such that these things are caught out earlier. We need to restore, strengthen, and legitimize law enforcement agencies, give the MPA back its bite. And we need to normalize ethical behavior with clear and visible action taken where wrongdoing is done. And that's normalize ethical behavior from our leaders all the way down through the whole of society. There's a clear focus in the report on public and private partnership, very important for South Africa to move forward, get the education and training right, and improve our governance on that. Professor Benang Mahali has written a book, Behold the Turtle. Prior to that was Reyes, and it's got some great pointers in bringing South Africa back to the fore. And committed leadership make difficult choices, must happen. Business needs to be socially conscious, and we have to have the shared compact with society and government. And the public-private partnership has also been emphasized. So wrapping it all up, what does it mean to you? In terms of formulating strategy for yourself, for your organization, really important to, when looking at strategy, incorporate and integrate risk and resilience into your strategy, understand the South African context in which we are operating, which the report clearly explains. And when doing strategy, look at multiple futures. In terms of scenario planning, there's not just one future, and incorporate then so the strategy, risk and resilience. The risk report in its entirety is available on the Imsa website. I have it on the slide. That's the website address. And just to finish with a nice phrase from Thuli Madonsela, is that we need to work together to build the South Africa we want. So thank you for your time this morning. I was the project lead on the risk report. I'm the managing director of PAX Resilience. We provide solutions in risk resilience and recovery. Should you have any questions, feel free to give me a call, and any questions out of the Imsa risk report. So thank you for your time. Lonnie, I think I can hand back to you. But apologies, I think I took a bit more time than I should have. So apologies on that. It's a large subject to cover.
Thank you so much for that very insightful presentation, Michael. A reminder to all of our attendees that InsureTalk20 is taking place on the 14th of April between 10 and 1 o'clock. This is the birthday edition. InsureTalk will be turning 2 years old. Can you believe it? So do head on over to the chat. We have posted it in the chat function over there, and do register yourself. All right, over to our next speaker now. He goes by the name of Stephen Sidley. Stephen is the author of Beyond Bitcoin, and his talk today is entitled Beyond Bitcoin, Decentralized Finance and the End of Banks. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much. I think I have about 25 minutes. I'm not going to use a presentation. I'm just going to talk to you. I'm going to talk to you specifically about decentralized finance, which is an outgrowth of what happened in 2019 when Satoshi wrote his famous paper, which was the start of the cryptocurrency revolution. But I'm specifically going to roll forward because in this book that I wrote, which is now in stores, I think it was sold out after the first week, but they've been restocked. There is an entire chapter on insurance, and there should be nobody in this audience who is not interested in the juggernaut that is coming to the insurance industry powered by blockchain. And there's a chapter in the book about that. And I think if I have time, because I've got about 25 minutes for my talk, I will get into what's happening in the insurance industry as a consequence of this revolution. So to start at the beginning, 1976, the internet sort of arrives as a research project funded by the Defense Agency in the United States to find a series of protocols that will connect computers together. Later on, a protocol is developed called The World Wide Web by Tim Berners-Lee, who was in Switzerland at the time. And in short order after that, a series of other protocols were developed, all of which we know and love. HTTPS, which you'll see at the beginning of your URL in your browser, JPEGs, video streaming, voice over IP, and those protocols get embedded on top of the internet layer, which allows people to develop applications which we all use. The question was asked soon after 1976, this is a perfect platform for us to develop money as a protocol, just like voice over IP or video streaming. But it turned out to be a profoundly difficult problem. It was a profoundly difficult problem technologically, and it was a profoundly difficult problem from the viewpoint of politics and world economics. But there were a bunch of researchers that started to try and solve these problems, and it took about 30 years. And in 2019, Satoshi, who is pseudonymous, nobody knows who he really is, wrote a 9-page paper. He had been working with a whole bunch of other cryptographers and computer scientists at the time. It was 9 pages long, and it solved all of the problems. And there were many, many problems in order for this to work in a trustworthy way, so that it couldn't be hacked, it couldn't be counterfeited, it would settle immediately, it would be centralized, it couldn't be intruded upon by sovereign eyes. And when the paper came out and the first transactions happened, there was no value on Bitcoin. It was just between these cryptographers. And in 2010, one of the cryptographers had a father, and his father owned a pizza parlor. And he had been telling his dad about this thing called Bitcoin, and his father was quite impressed with all this cryptography work that was going on. And he said to his son, okay, tell you what, you give me 10,000 of these things, and I'll give you 2 pizzas that you can share with your programmer buddies. And from that moment, Bitcoin had a value, $72 for 10,000 Bitcoins. One can imagine what that 10,000 is worth today. Bitcoin was based on a series of a base layer, a substrate of architectural plumbing called blockchain, which you've all heard about. And that architectural plumbing called Bitcoin, it's confusing, the blockchain is called Bitcoin and the currency is called Bitcoin, had one purpose and one purpose only. And that was to carry a token called a Bitcoin and be able to settle that token safely and move it from wallet to wallet or from an address to an address. It did very little else. It worked beautifully. It has never been hacked in 13 years. But something else happened of prime and fundamental importance, and the reason why we wrote this book called Decentralized Finance and the Interbank is that in 2014, a skinny Russian-Canadian teenager by the name of Vitalik Buterin thought he had a better idea. And what he did, he built a blockchain which looked very much like the Bitcoin blockchain. It worked in a very similar way. But he added a layer to the top of the blockchain, and that layer was a programming language. And he said, I'm going to give you a blockchain, I'm going to give you a programming language sitting at the top of it, in which anybody can write a program to address any problem they can dream up. That programming language, those programs are called smart contracts. You may have heard that term. They're written in a language called Solidity. There are other languages now. But he presented it to the world because he said to himself, the only application of this Bitcoin can't possibly just be a cryptocurrency. There's a whole bunch of other things that this thing can do. All this wonderful stuff that the blockchain enables surely is applicable to other targets. And when he put that out there in the world, and it's all open source, anybody from a garage, a teenager in a garage to a major corporation, could dream up an application to use all this wonderful stuff that sits on this blockchain. And that wonderful stuff includes, I'll give you some of the issues. It's decentralized, means that you cannot change a transaction once it's been done. It is unhackable. It is reversible to the very first transaction. It settles immediately or almost immediately, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole technical bunch of wonderfulness that emerges from this blockchain technology, which in itself emerged from a set of cryptographic algorithms. So now we've got a programming language sitting on the blockchain and a whole bunch of people looking at this programming language and scratching their heads and saying, what can we do with this? And they see a bunch of ossified industries that have massive targets on their back. And those industries are the financial industries. Why do they have massive targets on their bank? For the following reason. I'll just start with the banks. The first modern bank started in around 2012 with the Medicis, 2012, 2013. And those banks did really one thing, is they, people went off to fight wars and they stored their valuables for them. So it was a depository. Very soon after that, and the depository, by the way, had an IAU, so when people came back from the wars, they would hand back their jewels, and they were trustworthy. Soon after that, they realized they could lend out some of these valuables, and so now you had these two core functions of a bank: deposits and loans. If you roll forward from the 1300s to now, those are still the two core functions of a bank: deposits and loans. Now, they come in many forms. There's mortgages, there's credits, different kinds of credit, like credit cards. There are different kinds of deposit instruments. There are checking accounts and saving accounts and fixed deposits and T-bills in America, et cetera, et cetera. But those are the two core functions. It's not to say the banks are exactly the same as they were in the 1200, because they now provide many other services. They provide payment facilitation, such as clearing credit cards with other banks, allowing you to move your money from your bank to another bank or from your bank to an individual. They charge for that. It's called transaction charges. They sell securities. They sell insurance, your business. They do a whole bunch of other things. But sitting at the middle a little bit is they take deposits in and they loan those deposits out. And it was very quickly discovered that they could loan out those deposits many, many times, which is what fractional reserve lending is all about. So they can loan those deposits out 10 or 20 times. That business has become incredibly ossified, and it has not only become incredibly ossified, it is a black box. And I'm going to talk about that black box and why that black box became a target for those people who wanted to use smart contracts to rewrite those services. It's a black box because it's asymmetrical. And I'm going to tell you why that asymmetrical is so massively unbalanced and why we don't even think about it. If somebody walks into a bank with 200 Rand to open a checking account, they may be able to open that if there's not a minimum, but they are not a very important customer to the bank. And if you compare that against the person who walks in with 200 million Rand to open up a deposit, who gets their phone calls returned? Who gets taken out for dinner? Who gets taken to Arabella to play golf? That is such a tautological statement, we don't even think about it, but I claim that it is not fair. The person with the 200 Rand, his 200 Rands are worth exactly the same as the 200 Rands that came from the other guy's 20 million Rand pile, 200 million Rand pile. Why are they treated differently? Why does the other guy get a better rate? Why does the other guy get a quicker loan? It is an unlevel playing field, and we don't even think about it. I'll give you some other examples. At the end of the month, you get your bank statements, and on your bank statements, you may see once a year, well, we're increasing your transaction fees from X% to X%. And if you phone up the bank and say, I don't want you to increase my transaction fees, why are you increasing them? Can I see the algorithm? Can I see the math? Can I see the rationale and the spreadsheets? You'll be told to go take a hike. Similarly, if you say, I don't like the deposits, the amount of interest rate you're giving me, the yield that you're giving me, or the loan that I'm taking out, you're charging me too much. I think that the spread that you're taking through is too big a profit. You're going to be told to take a hike. And something even worse happens. When you get annoyed with your bank, as we all have done, I'm sure, you can't just pick up and go to another bank, because there is a lock-in syndrome, because it's a pain in the neck to move from one bank to the other. So you grit your teeth through long call center times, you grit your teeth through transaction fees that go up and you don't understand them. You grit your teeth through deposit amounts and loan amounts that you may not agree with, and you have no opportunity to look inside this black box and decide whether you like those calculations, because the bank will say, this is my IP, and you can't see it, and you're just a customer. That problem collapses in DeFi. So what some of these programmers did is they rewrote the loan deposit credit debit algorithm, and they are viewable to anybody. You can see the algorithms. Every single dollar that goes into that loan or deposit is exactly the same, no matter how rich you are. You ask nobody's permission to do it, et cetera, et cetera. Banks have even a worse problem than that, is that their cost basis encapsulates tens of thousands of employees, big buildings downtown, big marble receptions, profits to shareholders, Mercedes-Benz's, executive salaries. The cost basis of a global bank cannot compete with a smart contract that is being written by 3 people and offers yields on that smart contract or loan amounts which are infinitely more mouth-watering than that which you can get a traditional bank. Let me just take a look at the time here. Okay. Now let me move on to the other targets. Exchanges, and I'm talking about traditional exchanges like stock exchanges or bond exchanges. There's also a black box there. The black box is that you are charged a certain amount by your broker in order to find a buyer for your stuff that you want to sell. And that thing that sits in the middle is an exchange. And that exchange extracts rent from you to settle that transaction with trust. Just the same way as your bank says, I'll hold your money with trust, and they do, they're not going to lose it, and I'll loan your money with trust, and I'll comply to all government rules, etc. They do all that stuff. And they charge you rent to do it. But what most people don't realize, or what we claim, is that the rent you are paying for that trust is too high. The amount of commission that you're paying for your broker is too high. Your broker may have conflicts of interest. He makes his money when he does a lot of trades. He doesn't care whether you make or lose money on your trade, etc., etc., etc. So exchanges are black boxes, banks are black boxes. There are built-in conflicts of interest, particularly with commission people or people who earn on trades. Moving over to the insurance industry, which I'm hoping I'll have time to get into more detail. The insurance industry is probably as bad as the banks in terms of black box. What happens when you take out insurance is that it gets thrown into this massive washing machine that sits in the middle of insurance companies, in which there are actuarial maths that are done. There is risk calculation. There are claims departments. There are reinsurers, which, as you know, which insure the institution which gives you a premium. And finally, at the back end, a premium pops out, and they offer you this premium for your car or your house insurance or whatever it is. A year later, you will get a notice from your insurance company saying we are changing your premiums from this to this. You do not get the opportunity to say, why? Can you show me the calculations? You do not get the opportunity to say to your insurance company, can I see the calculations that brought you to this amount of the premium? It's an absurd thing to even think. You would be laughed out of the place. There is a number of insurance products now in the DeFi world, the best known of which is Nexus Mutual. And I want to talk about it in more detail because it's critical to those of you in the industry who think this DeFi, blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum stuff is happening somewhere else. It's coming for your industry. And the reason I can tell you that it's coming for the industry is Nexus Mutual and a couple of the others that have started up now are now being courted by the biggest insurance companies in the world because their cost base is zero, their code is open, there's no information asymmetry, the premiums get settled immediately. And the way that they do that using decentralization of the blockchain is fascinating. So just let me put a hold on that right now and talk about some of the other things before I get there. Okay. So we have the banks that have targets on their backs. We have the insurance companies that have targets on their backs. We have the exchanges that have targets on their backs. And right now, in the world of DeFi, there are literally hundreds of loan deposit projects which are offering today, right now. You can go to nexus.com, open it up, and you'll be getting 13% on your rent, period. 13%. How much are you getting on your savings deposit? Forget about South Africa. If you live in American England, you go to nexo.com or Abreast.com or any one of the other ones, you'll get 11 to 13% on your dollar or on your pound compared to the 0.25% that you're getting on your checking account deposit in your global bank. The banks cannot compete with that. And there are now hundreds of billions of value locked in those loan contracts. And they're so far reasonably safe. I say reasonably because hacks have happened, but they haven't happened to the big ones. And in this book over here, I talk about who the big trustworthy ones are. There are a lot of small ones which are more risky. The There are products within the world of DeFi, which has arisen once again from the Bitcoin paper, which led to Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, which led to programmability, which led to smart contracts, which have no equivalent in the traditional financial world. I'll give you one example. There is one guy who is a sort of a godhead in the world of DeFi, and he happens to be a nice boy from Stellenbosch. He was a programmer. His name is Andre Cronje. If you go into the world of crypto, everybody who knows who Andre Cronje is, but very few people outside of there do know who he is. He, in 2017, saw these projects, these deposit and loan projects. And he noticed that these guys were paying 32%, and that 32% would lie there for a week or two, and then would suddenly drop to 18%. And these guys were paying, 480%, which would pay that amount out for 2 days, and then suddenly drop to 7% because of changes in various things. There were hundreds of these. So he wrote a little program on top of it, which sniffed the horizon, sniff, and chose the best yields that you could get on a real-time basis. And as soon as that yield started to drop, he would pull your money out. And he did this for himself, by the way. Would pull his money out and then move it to a high yield one. He was making the triple digit yields in 2017, 2018, and then he released it to the world. And the project is called Yearn, Y-Earn. And if you go to yearn.finance, you can see it over there. I have deposited some money into one of his, what they're called vaults. Last year I made 62%. This is passive income. Now, it doesn't take a great deal of math to realize that you can't sustain 62% annual yield, because you'll suck all the money out of the universe quite quickly. So these yields will start to settle down as this thing matures, as everything starts to mature. But the bottom line is that the cost basis of a DeFi contract is a program that costs nothing, that has no huge legacy infrastructure and cloud and data centers and consultants and governance and what. I used to work at Anglo American. I know what it's like to ask for a small change in a website. It takes 3 months and 15 governance committees to do anything. I was the group CTO at Anglo American. With a smart contract, it's immutable, it can't change, it costs nothing to do, and the banks simply cannot compete. So what you're hearing right now is the whooshing sound of money leaving the traditional finance industry and dropping into these new big DeFi projects, which have only been around for 2 or 3 years. It's the blink of an eye. You are hearing not yet a whooshing sound, but a whistling sound of insurance money moving to the DeFi-powered insurance companies like Nexus Mutual, and there's a whole bunch of other ones which you can look up, which I have listed in my book. All of the big institutions in the world, the global financial institutions, the exchanges, the insurance companies, the banks, the derivative markets. When we started the book in 2021, we did an unscientific poll of a bunch of bankers. We've got banker friends like everybody else. And we said, have you guys heard of DeFi? Nobody had heard of DeFi. Nobody. People sitting at board level had not heard of DeFi. By middle of 2021, everybody had heard of DeFi. And what they were saying about DeFi, this is toxic, this is kryptonite, this is poison, you're going to lose all your money. And now in February, where are we? March 2022, every single global financial institution in the world, including the insurance companies, have got DeFi initiatives underway. Blockchain programmable initiatives to lower the cost of services and to provide things that the traditional financial industry can't provide. I wanted to return to Y-Earn with Andre Cronje. So he released this program into the world, which now sniffs out the best yields for you. And there is no equivalent in the traditional world, because once you're stuck with a bank, it's very difficult to move to somebody who has a high interest rate elsewhere. There's friction, you've been locked in. But this is instantaneous and almost zero cost. And as I say, I got 62% last year. This year, I'm probably down to getting about 25%, but it's still way in excess of anything I can get. Very easy to use. You go in there, you transfer some money into there, and it starts working instantaneously. It takes 7 seconds. There's no KYC. There's none of that stuff. You just put your money in and it collects income. There are a whole bunch of other matters around this which you will all have questions about. And in this very brief period over here that I've been allowed to talk, I can't address them all. One of them is the amount of energy that's being used. And I'll just caution you with that. The energy debate has been accompanied by some of the worst journalistic reporting I've ever seen in my life. People who have not done their homework about what this energy thing is all about. I'll just give you 2 stats and leave you over there. The Kimmel report on mining came out 4 weeks ago, Kimmel. I urge you to look it up. Proof of work mining, which is Bitcoin and Ethereum for the meantime, although Ethereum's moving away from that, is 0.01% of the world's energy and 0.08% of the world's carbon output. It's a rounding error. If you do the math properly, this is not an issue. Moreover, at the beginning of 2021, 35% of mining energy was clean. 65% of it was dirty, was coal. By the middle of 2021, that number had gone 56% is clean. By the end of this year, 72% of mining energy will be clean, making it cleaner than the cell phones in your pockets and the cars that you drive. The energy debate will be a non-issue by the end of 2022. The second issue I want to talk about before I close is probably the most important and the most fraught, which is who has the most to lose and how are they trying to defend their territory. And the 2 players who have the most to lose are governments and banks, all of whom have numerous bodies that regulate, make policies all the way up from national regulation down to the bodies that make banking regulations. And some of them are national, and as you know, some of them are global. The same exists in your industry where you have multiple bodies and you have to comply to a whole bunch of stuff. Some of them are legal and some of them are just policy guidelines. All of them are trying to fight back, at least trying to minimize what is clearly going to be a threat to the industries. And they're doing that on a wide spectrum. They're doing that, if you go on one side of the spectrum, you've got El Salvador, which you may have heard about. El Salvador has passed a law that Bitcoin is legal tender. And they've said this stuff is completely open. There are no laws to prevent, hinder anything. The stuff, come here, you can use Bitcoin just like you can use the dollar to go buy. And it's been extraordinarily successful in El Salvador. In all the way to other countries where if you mention the word cryptocurrency, you get thrown into jail, and we all know who those countries are. Somewhere in between, there is regulatory chaos and warfare. How do we regulate this thing? You move up to the nation states over here. Nation states have got to do 2 things. They've got to collect taxes on the one side, and they've got to see the movement of money through the economy. Otherwise, they don't know if interest rates should be raised or lowered. They don't know whether the economy is in healthy states. And so they're trying to find regulations that allows them to collect taxes or minimizes the possibility of people cheating on their taxes. And by the way, people cheat on their taxes in the traditional finance world at a rate that is orders of magnitude higher than in the cryptocurrency world. And they've got to be able to see the flow of money through the economy. Most people who are in cryptocurrency and are rational about it want regulation, because what we want is the advantage of the blockchain technology. And most people do not want to cheat, do not want to commit crimes, don't want to cheat on their taxes, do want the governments to understand how much money they have to provide services. And that regulation is slowly beginning to take shape. And probably by toward the end of this year as well, most of the major countries will have good regulation in shape. And then all of this crypto world suddenly opens up to institutions. When I say suddenly, over the past 3 weeks, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Paribas, there's a whole bunch of other ones have all opened crypto divisions, so all now giving opening investment opportunities to their clients, both wholesale and retail. And I'll close off by saying I want to, because I've done a big data dump on you guys here, I want to urge you to go buy the book, which has now been restocked. It's also on Amazon and Take-A-Lot and Loot and all the others. But the difference that I want to just leave on the table is that most of everybody has been looking at Bitcoin and the others. And if I buy this thing, then hopefully the price will rise tomorrow, the price will rise again, the price will rise again. That's cryptocurrency investing. And some people who got in early did very well at that. DeFi, which is what this book is about, is how the blockchain can put your existing assets to work for you, like they do when you do an investment in a deposit instrument or even in a stock market. They're 2 different things. One is putting your money to work, and the other one is hoping that the asset price rises. And that takes me to my 25 minutes. So I'm going to shut down here. I hope you buy my book. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Very interesting presentation over there. Well, the future is definitely a Bitcoin from what we just heard there. Thank you so much. All right, our very next speaker now is Thokozile Mahlangu. She's no stranger to InsureTalk. She is the CEO of the IISA. She's going to be giving us an IISA update. Over to you, Thokozile.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is almost the end of Q1 of 2022. A lot has been happening in our world. We have just completed the triple BEE verification, and I'm pleased to inform you that we have been rated as a level 2 contributor. This is a huge milestone for us. In the next few days, we will be distributing the digital magazine Beyond Insurance is what we've named it. This is a member-only benefit, so members keep a lookout for the magazine. It is filled with content that you do not want to miss. And I want to take this opportunity and thank all industry leaders, all thought leaders that contributed to the content of the magazine. I'm also pleased to inform you that we've extended the deadline for the member survey. We sent out the survey a few weeks ago, inviting members to give us feedback. Due to an overwhelming response to extend the deadline, we've extended it to the 8th of May. So members, we want to hear from you on various aspects of our business. The feedback you give to us helps us to improve, to enhance our service, to make sure we are relevant to you. And we can only do that if you give us the feedback. So please respond to the survey. We will send a reminder in the next few days, reminding you to complete the survey and stand a chance to win free membership for the next cycle, free webinar or seminar attendance, a seminar of your choice. You will decide which one you want to attend if you are a successful winner, and also free attendance of the virtual session of the AIE 2022 conference. So take time and click on the link and complete the survey. It will take you about 10 minutes to complete the survey. This year, we'll be hosting a number of webinars and seminars and slowly introduce in-person events that will be limited to members only and will be free to members. So why don't you take the opportunity and become an ISA member and enjoy these benefits? I also just want to share that we currently have just over 3,000 members versus over 200,000 KIs and REs registered with the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. That's an indication that there is a lot of insurance professionals that are eligible to become ISA accredited members. So have you been in the industry for a year or more? You may be eligible to become an accredited professional member of the ISA and be associated with a SAQA accredited professional body. So I invite you on this call, if you are not an ISA professional member yet, visit our website, click on the button that says become a member, populate the information, submit the necessary documentation, and be accredited, as I said, by a SAQA approved professional body. I also want to remind you to register for the conference and not miss out on an opportunity to either network face-to-face with us in Sun City or network with us virtually, because the conference will be a hybrid this time. Thank you, and I look forward to welcoming each and every professional on this call that is not an ISA member yet at the ISA family. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thokozile, for that update. Lots of exciting things happening within the IISA. All right, our very next speaker now is Tony Fanikak. He's the founder of Cover. He's going to be giving us an insurance media update. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Today, we've listened to the very scary risks facing South Africa and facing ourselves. And I thought to go on to that theme, Cover, and I'm so glad that I followed on Thokozile because it's all about education that I would like to talk about. Cover is about sharing knowledge and sharing your knowledge, the industry's knowledge, not our knowledge. And if we just briefly look at that, you know, we've listened to all the risks that are facing us, and we all know that probably the biggest risk facing us that links into all and every risk that we can think of is the expanded unemployment rate of 46.6%, the youth unemployment rate of 66.6%, grade 1 to grade 12 dropout rate of 33%. That's a third of all students that enter school does not get to grade 12. Basically, what we're doing is we're not just increasing the unemployment rate, we're also increasing the unemployable rate. And how do we fix that? We fix that with education. And I thought just, I found a very nice little video to illustrate how each and every one of us can make a difference in whichever way to help with making people employable and with increasing the employment rate in South Africa. So I must first of all apologize. The video is actually a video that is an advert for a company, and I'm not promoting the company, and InsureTalk is not promoting the company. But because the video is so great, I thought of showing you this very brief video and giving them the credit for making this great video. So let's hope that the video works, and I hope you enjoy that.
This is the place where the river meets the land. That demand won't wash away like this. This is why people are.
My sincere apologies. It seems that the video is not working. Unfortunately, basically what I wanted to share with you with this video is that it is the story of one man that planted a forest in India. He started for 37 years to plant one tree at a time. He rode across a lake. He planted one tree at a time. And in 37 years, he planted a forest, a whole forest, where elephants, rhino, tigers, buck, antelope, everyone came back. This forest today is protecting the livelihoods of thousands and thousands of people. The work that was done by one man created a forest that is twice the size of New York Central Park. And this was one man planting one tree at a time, one day at a time, for for his life from the age of 16 for 37 years. And each person can actually, through this, plant a tree. And by educating a child, by assisting with educating a child. If I can, my apologies for that, the video is not showing. We have spoken to Sparrow schools, and I'm not saying that everyone must assist Sparrow schools, but just to illustrate to you that for only 100 Rand per month, you can help Sparrow to educate a disadvantaged child, a child that would not be able to get the schooling that they need. And I'm not talking about mainstream schools. I'm talking about kids that come from environments where going to a mainstream school, even a normal government school, is not within their ability. And schools like Sparrow and other NGOs can assist those children to reach the ability to be able to go to a mainstream school. And for only 100 Rand a month, for example, at Sparrow schools, you can put a disadvantaged child through school. And all I would like to ask through my presentation, and again, I apologize for the video not showing, is that think about the fact that the only way for us to solve the unemployment problem is to educate children and take them through school to get them ready to be able to make a difference in life. Thank you very much for that. And my video did not want to play.
Thank you so much, Tony. We are off to a good start in the first half of our session. Right over to the entertainment segment now with the dynamic duo from C Results. That is Alan Harris and Ricky Shabalala. They will be chatting to us today around entrepreneurship and starting all over again with a fitness boxing tip. Over to you, team.
Hello everybody, a little bit of a different environment here. As you can see, we don't have our nice, smart, fancy clothes on or anything like that. But here's Ricky Shabalala, two-time national champion boxer, South African, and Kippy over here, Alan. Guys, nice to have you, Carl. Thank you for this awesome opportunity and this great platform. Love learning through others. Just guys, I know the topic is risk. So just from my side here, I wanted to talk a little bit about risk-taking. It doesn't matter what age you are. I'm 46 years old. Teeny bit of history. I was part of graffiti from the beginning. Was there for 17 years. We then sold the business to Imperial. And just said to myself one day, spoke to my wife and said, you know what? Time to change. Let's see if we can grow some more businesses, allow for more opportunities. Also listening to the other speakers this morning, to enable also some more jobs, job creation, and also take people that are possibly not that educated and try and show them the sweet science of boxing and fitness and make the world a very, very happy and healthy place. Our ethos at C Results is, basically happy health and strong mind. So from my side, after 17 years in a full life cycle of a business, I sat down, I said, okay, what can we do? And I always love to innovate and reinvent. And I thought, okay, what can make a difference? And came across an opportunity to grow basically a fitness studio called C Results, and with punch tracking technology. So what we did was, we've got some punch tracking technology which tracks your speed, power, number of punches, and your fitness score. And it's never been done before in the world, so that excited me a little bit more. And we've created an environment to take these punch trackers and put them into an environment that's happy, healthy, and to ensure that we improve people's lives through fitness. To me, it's still the cheapest form of medicine. And yeah, so just from a risk point of view, 2 beautiful children, that was the hardest decision I ever made, because it's much easier taking risks between the ages of 20 and 30. But, you know, I said to myself, you've got one trip around this world, let's make it happen. So we opened up C Results literally 3 years ago. I spent 1.5 years in all the boxing gyms, MMA gyms, just doing a bit of R&D and checking what can be done to make sure I'm on the right path. We then opened basically 3 years ago. And yeah, it's been an amazing ride. I'm sure you guys are all well read out there. Carl, I know you love your reading. And yeah, it takes a good 2 to 3 years before you start making money in a business. Generally, after the 3rd year, you're either making the money or you've lost it all and it was a bad idea. But as the famous people out there says, the key to building a business is to, you know, basically never, ever give up. You know, you might need to change direction. You might need to rethink strategy and all of those kind of things, but have a goal, have a vision, have a dream, and have energy. You know, to me, age is a number. You know, I still feel 23, and yeah, don't fall into that. It's never too late to start something else or move another position or any of those kind of things. Because I promise you now, with enough work, enough hard work, dedication, and the big keys to success, and I always say, is companies are pieces of paper, people make businesses, so we're surrounding ourselves with a great team. I also look at Carl, and I'm very blessed, I've met some of his team. You can see part of his strategy is surrounding himself with great people that can teach you, and obviously not that you have to tell them what to do every day and all of those kind of things. So, you know, just a bit of adversity through the risk. We went through COVID. We were sitting at 156 members. After COVID, we were at 46. We were like, oh, here we go. But we got one trip, guys, bit of innovation, thinking of other things out of the blocks. It's just never give up. And we're very fortunate right now. We put a lot of hard sweat and tears into it. Blood, sweat and tears, Ricky? That's the game. And yeah, we got a dream, we got a vision, and we know we're going to get there. We're at 377 members. God is great. We're very blessed with that. And yeah, like I say, keys to business, never give up. Surround yourself with amazing people. Have a goal, have a strategy. What I have learned also in business is we used to be able to say, I've got a 5-year journey, I've got a 3-year journey, I've got a whatever. It's no longer. You've got a day journey. Every day, you've got to make sure that you've got things to do, especially if you're in the entrepreneurial space where you're on your own. In my last business, I had 211 staff, and then it was me handing out brochures again with a boxing glove at the robots. But it's a very exciting story. You look at all your successful businesses, they all started somewhere. And yeah, the keys were just keep going, grinding it out, and adapt or die. And who wants to die in this day and age? We're so blessed to have businesses. Yes, I know we've got our challenges in South Africa, but with challenges, there's opportunity. That's the biggest thing. So how do we get the education up? How do we employ more people? You know, let's be part of the solution. And yeah, our goal is to just make the world happier, healthier, and yeah, we're gonna just change the world through fitness. That is me for now. We've got the 2-time national champion, South African legend here. Go check out YouTube. Go check out this man. He's a machine. He's made a decision to come on board and give me a lot of his skills, which I've learned a lot from. And that's once again learning through others. And yeah, he's been a big success. Members love him. You know, people are looking for a place to go. They're looking for the love quality. You know, I'm going to quickly share something. You know, in the olden days, we were all hired on IQ. There was Encyclopedia Britannica. That was our information. Then we had Google. So we didn't need to have the highest IQ. We could then just go into EQ, our emotional intelligence. That's how people were hiring. So with AI now, with the challenges, with Bitcoin, all of those kind of things, the reality is there's a thing that everyone's starting to talk about and realizing that robots and any computer program cannot replace, and that's the love quality. Okay, so that how are you doing? How's everything going? What's going on? Obviously not too personal, but just giving them a place, and it doesn't have to be a gym. It can be, you know, an insurance company. Greet the parent and really look after your clients. Give them that love quality. We call that. I was listening. Sorry, I forgot the gentleman's name, but yeah, he was saying from an insurance point of view, if you've got 200 Rand or 2 million Rand, treat that person with 200 Rand exactly the same, because he could be the 200 million Rand person. So yeah, keys, guys, love your clients, give them everything, and don't put them into boxes. Just make them want to come back. Give them something they never ever want to turn their backs on. So that's me. Alan dropped in the mic. We're over to Ricky. He's going to tell you a little bit about risk in boxing. Then we're going to do a fun little exercise. I'd like you all to put your cameras on, because Ricky would like to see. We're going to do a 1-minute little challenge with all of you. Get that blood flowing. So here we go. Thank you so much, guys. Go out there. We can do it. South Africa is great.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate the lovely intro. Everybody, thank you so much. And good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are at the moment. Great to meet you. Again, my name is Ricky Shabalala. A little bit of a background on me. I'm a 2-time national champion. So that was a little bit of something that I managed to capture when I was in the amateur ranks as a fighter and current professional. I've left the sport because of what I'm going to talk about. My topic today is risk, and I'll get into deeper as to why I left the sport. But let's start back from the beginning. Yeah, I'm here, guys, and as a professional fighter in a gym training individuals, you do get a form of risk. You get a form of risk in teaching people how to engage in combat who've never engaged in combat before. So being an athlete, we train daily, probably 2 to 3 times a day at 2-hour intervals. And in between that, you're eating and recovering for the next training. So it's quite serious. Your body goes under quite I'd say a dramatic change when it comes to your muscles and growth of the body, and just adapting to the high intensity work that you're going to be doing and enduring throughout the ring or the ring time. So when you're teaching those skills and techniques to individuals who have day jobs and it isn't their main thing, you've got to be very cautious as to how you explain to them for application. Let's say, for example, punches or so on and so forth. If somebody punches incorrectly, you could potentially hurt your wrist, hurt your knuckle, injure your shoulder, whatever the case is. So we work on trying to limit that by simplifying it, but again, simplifying it so much so that you still feel and look like a fighter, but not so much so that we're getting into the nitty-gritty and what they call the art of boxing. That's the real deep side. I definitely think that if I jump onto, if I jump off of that topic and I'm going to jump onto my side, as a pro boxer, it's been quite a journey because I started at about 15 years old. I'm 30 now, turning 13 in October. So I'm 15 years old. It's been a good 15-year-long journey, and I didn't understand any risk. I did it because I enjoyed it, I loved it, and I wanted to just get incorporated with something that I felt that I was good at, and I took to it quite quickly. 2-3 years down the line, I had a few fights. And it was really just for fun, you know. I'd get to the gym really early, I'd leave really late, and I'd be quite consistent. And I just found fun in this rhythm that I was able to manage. Only later in my career, when I started getting more serious and getting up into the higher ranks nationally, provincially in the country, that I started facing opponents who were a lot more skilled. And the older I got, the bigger I got. So I'd have to face guys and opponents who were my size as well. Only then I realized, okay, there's a real danger being in this ring, and you have to then prepare differently. So the mindset started to shift from when I was a youngster, I became about 20, and I then had to adjust the way I applied my training, as well as the way I mentally went into the fight. So I just had to understand what I was going into a little bit more. That was cool, and we went through the ranks. I was able to, again, went to 2014 SA Championships. I caught silver there. I went to the 2015, I got gold, and I went to 2016, I got gold. I was picked for the Olympic team. Unfortunately, we weren't able to go through to the Rio qualifiers. So that was a technical thing that had happened with the organizers. But outside that, once that happened, I went straight to pro. I didn't feel like I had enough time in the amateurs. And again, back to my risk factor, things changed. In the pro game, things changed quite dramatically. And I'll tell you why. It's because when you're fighting as an amateur, you fight because you love the sport. You have it's an art and you're trying to hone it. It's the same in pros, but the difference is you're fighting men and women who have families, who have kids, who have to put money and food on the table. And the thing is, it levels up really quickly. You have to get very serious, very fast. I'm quite a playful, happy, chill guy, and it was a bit of an adjustment for me. I was very lucky to get into my pro career and be undefeated until taking my most recent loss. It was my 6th fight, and I took a loss. Unfortunately, I had a bit of a unfortunate situation in my family. I just lost 2 family members, and I went into a very important fight. I was number 2 in the country, and unfortunately took my first loss. So I haven't necessarily been back, but in a roundabout spin of a way, I managed to reset, refocus, and find my feet again. Funny enough, around that time is when I met Alan and approached boxing from a different perspective. Now, he managed to speak about boxing and business and how to be efficient in business. I had to learn the brutal truth in that fight that I lost, that boxing is a business. And if you're not winning and if you're not on top all the time, you can very quickly be right at the back and not looked at and not be in the front of the media. And it was hard for me to adjust. But once I met Alan, I was able to take his teachings and implement it into my game. And I realized how my game actually, prepared me to be in a business realm. So it's funny because, right now I'm able to just find a lot of love for my sport through different arts. Very, very keen to get into the next part of our little talk here. And thank you so much, guys, for just hearing me give you a little bit of a lowdown on what we do. I'm going to quickly get into a basic tutorial about how to punch so that we can do just a quick 2-minute lesson and workout for the next
guys. While he's wrapping up there, guys, very quickly. So I'm not too sure how many of you, I'm sure you've all done sports or you've done some sort of activity that you've had an end goal and whatever. And one of the things that excited about Ricky is he's a pro boxer. He knows what he had to do. He had to have discipline. He had to have drive. He had to have vision. He had to have goals. So I always say, if you've been in a sport before, take everything you did in that sport and put it into a business. That's all that you've got. You've got the roadmap. You've got the secret sauce. That is how you approach business, the same way as if you were going to go do some sort of sport. And he's taught me a hell of a lot as well. So here we go, Ricky. So go for it, man. We're going to just jump 6 punches.
All right, guys. So I'm just going to assume everyone's at a very basic, never boxed before level.
So everybody stand up. Get out of your chairs.
So you can just stand up, follow me. If you're standing up, nice and relaxed, shoulders to your side and feet just in line, you can take 1 step back with your right leg. So imagine you're on 2 parallel lines. You just want to take 1 step back with your right leg. Right? That will just allow you to have a little bit more of a base. So you're not standing square. You can fall back and forward. You've got a little bit of a base so that you can hold yourself up while you throw your punches. Right? Footwork is key. From there, we're going to pick our left hand up. I just want you to put it nice and high here by the temple. I'm going to ask you to bring that right hand up, put it very nice and high here by your cheek. That's that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work through our 6 basic punches. These are the 6 punches you need to know, and I'll get through it. Your lead hand, your left hand, your number 1. I'm going to ask you to extend your elbow out and rotate at the end. Okay, so you just want to extend and rotate. Keep it nice and straight, turn. So I'm gonna ask you to follow me, give me 5 like this, 4, 3, good, 2, time. Beautiful, guys. So that's your first punch. We're gonna jump off into the number 2. It's another straight punch, all right? So what you're doing is the exact same thing and turning your right hand, okay? Turning that right hand. Extend and turn. Turn, good. 2, 3, 4, and time. All right, guys. So you got your 1-2 punches, all right? I'm going to get into the next one. You got your hooks. They're quite simple. You bring your elbows nice and high, all right, like you're hugging somebody. And what you're going to do is just rotate across like that, okay? Just get that feel. How are you rotating across and turning at the waist? That's pretty much how you throw your hooks, okay? So I'm going to ask you again, get a nice little bit of a lead hand. So you got your left hand over here. You just want to turn across and bring your hand back, okay? Turn across and bring your hand up. Raising the elbow, rotating and bring it back. Then you got your right, same story. All right, we're going to get through these a little bit quicker just because I feel like we got the idea of how to punch. I'll give you a few examples. And then you got our last ones, some uppercuts, all right? So you're going to go up over here and you just have your palms facing upwards. And you're going to be digging essentially and just digging across and up along the back. So those are our 6 punches. All right.
Okay, guys, so listen, Ricky's going to do a 30-second workout with you. We're not going to do a minute. We're running out of time. Ricky, let's just give you a call. 1 or 2 combos, 30 seconds, guys. I want to see you all sweating. Let's make it happen.
All right, guys. So we're going to start with our 1-2s, just straight punches, all right? I'm going to go left, right, down the middle. So I'm going to ask for 10 like that. Ready? 2, 1, let's go. Left, right, 1. Left, right, 2, good. Left, right, 3, 4, good. 5, keep with me. 6, 7, good. 8, nice and explosive. 9, and time. Good. We're getting to those 3 4s, those hooks. So left, right, let's go. 1, 2, good. 3, good. 4, nice, guys. 5, 6, 7, hold on. 8, 9, and 10. Good. All right, guys, beautiful. Last one are going to be our uppercuts. So you remember, you bring those hands up and rolling them backwards up towards you. So let's get it in. Last 10 for that. I want you to get nice and explosive because our last 10 is usually. So 1, right. We on it? Let's go. Come on. 1, 2, yeah. 3, good. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and time. Well done, everybody. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Guys, thank you so much for your time. Guys, every day's a day of opportunity. Let's not get caught up in the noise. Whenever there's adversity, there's so much opportunity. Find the way. We can't wait to meet you guys again. Thank you so much, Carl, for the great platform. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you, guys. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you so much to the C Results team. That was tons of fun and not to mention inspirational. I'm certainly inspired to dust up my own boxing gloves and get back into the ring. All right, over to our next speaker now. She goes by the name of Nicola Camninos. Nicola is the Group Chief Risk Officer, Enterprise Risk Management at the JSE. Nicola is going to be chatting to us today about using risk management to enable business growth and innovation. Over to you, Nicola.
Hi, morning everyone. I'm a bit out of breath after that workout, which was a huge amount of fun. Thanks so much for the invite to talk to you. And I think that was such a lovely reminder for all of us to just make sure that we keep on moving. I think with sitting behind our PCs and remote working has really been hectic. So thanks, guys. I've got a few moves to show my boys. I've got 3 boys. And they love boxing. Their boxing bag's just outside, but now mommy's going to show them I've got a few moves of my own. So that was lovely. Thanks so much. So this is really hard to now follow on all this energy. So I'm really going to try and keep you engaged with an extremely boring topic, which is risk management, which hopefully I can make a little bit more exciting for you. I'm just going to share my screen and share my presentation. And yeah, let's try. Sorry, I'm still out of breath. So the thing that I wanted to talk to you about today is really why risk management, is so important for each and every one of us. So yes, I am a risk manager, but it's not my background. It's not what I've studied. I studied investments. I'm a CFA charter holder. And the thing that I believe in is just what one of the speakers spoke about earlier today, is really that risk management is everyone's business. Each and every one of us need to take risks. I think Carl said that. You can't manage a business if you don't take enough risks. And if you are too risk averse, you won't be able to grow your business and innovate. So it's really important for each and every one of us to understand our role as risk managers and how do we make sure that we leverage that and those skills in order to make strategic decisions, in order to help grow our businesses and to innovate. So I really hope we can make this conversation interactive. So if I can please ask you to use the chat box function, I'll keep an eye out there. If you've got any questions or any comments, please drop them in the comments box, and let's try and keep the box energy up. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is, why is it important for a risk manager to be able to enable strategic decision making? Because I think traditionally everyone looks at risk management as it's the brakes. It's really telling you to stop and you can't do that, you can't do that. It's all the rules and regulations and all the red tape. But the way I look at risk management is completely different. For me, it's all about your risk appetite. What are the things you want to be doing? What are the things you are wanting to enable in your business? And so the reason you have to be risk aware is because you're dealing with so much change, and change is the only constant that we're faced with. So I'm going to give you two concepts. The one is a VUCA world, which is, I think some of you might be familiar with. They talk about a lot of volatility, which I think we talk about when we think about stock exchanges, so even the JSE, and certainly with the unrest in Russia and the Ukraine, we've seen extreme volatility in the market. So the market prices go up and down, so it's been extremely volatile. But volatility just generally talks to any uncertainties we faced with, any impact that it has to not just stock prices, but the volatility of the rand or any other type of instrument that has a price associated with it. And we deal with a lot of complexity in the world, as well as ambiguity. It's not a black and white thing. There's a lot of gray stuff we deal with. So that's just really an acronym that gets used a lot to define what changes we deal with. And then the second one is a tuna one, which I find quite interesting. It's one that came from the Oxford University in the last couple of years, is they start talking about turbulence, which is similar to volatility, but also the unpredictable uncertainty. And I think with COVID, we've really seen that. There's complete unpredictable uncertainty. We wouldn't have known that we would have dealt with a global pandemic that has actually forced us all to now go to online platforms like this, where I can get a boxing workout early in the morning. So really, really a different approach, completely different world that we're dealing with. And then the novelty being a lot of new threats that we faced with. And I think if we think about climate change and that beautiful example that was made a little bit earlier with that, with the guy that planted all the trees in India. It was a complete desolate piece of land on his island. And he essentially created a forest, which is so beautiful. Another example of how each and every one of us can become a risk manager and actually practically manage those risks within our environment by doing something small like planting a tree once a year. And then ambiguity, again, not black and white. We deal with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of grayness. So that's really perpetual change is the key thing that we're dealing with continuously. And so really important for us to be able to identify all of those potential threats as well as opportunities. So risk management is not just about looking at what can go wrong. Risk management is about what can I do to best grow my business given the current circumstances. And we live in South Africa, and we saw Michael Davies talk a little bit earlier about the Imsa risk report, which does, and I agree, there was a comment made by someone earlier that said it's quite depressing. It was quite hard earlier this year as well. I had to talk about the World Economic Forum's global risk report, And it really is a very depressing story looking at what's happening around the world. So it's very important for all of us to focus on those opportunities. What do we do? And South Africans are always such resilient individuals. And it's amazing to see all the different things that we come up with and new business opportunities that we create in such challenging times. So I think that's exactly that, is when you think about yourself as a risk manager, you'll think about the threats. What are those things that can go wrong, that can impact me negatively? But you also want to think about those opportunities. We've gotten people that have set up new businesses with hand sanitizers and masks and all those sorts of things during COVID. Even online platforms like this have flourished. So there's always positive in a challenging time. So I wanted to ask you, if you haven't used the chat function yet, please drop some comments in the comment box just to share with me how you in your personal capacity, maybe for a company that you work for, whether you work for yourself, how do you keep abreast of emerging risks? And essentially what that really means is just stuff that hasn't happened yet, things that could impact your business, things that can potentially derail your plans, and so it could pose as a threat and it could hold you back from achieving those business goals, or it could create an opportunity and a completely different way for you to achieve your business goals. So please drop some thoughts in the comment box on how do you do that and how do you make sure that you keep abreast of emerging risks. So I see some guys are saying that they're watching the news, social media, and what competitors are up to. I mean, those are definitely important sources. So please let your comments roll in. I think we can always learn from each other in terms of how we keep abreast of emerging risks. I think one of the key things for me that I quite enjoy are a couple of tools that I'm going to be sharing with you today. Thanks, Renee, also for sharing. Being an UMA, we're basically dictated to this. According to me, the best is to insure your debtors and insure your business to make sure you keep up. Okay, so insurance is another way of keeping up with emerging risks because we won't always know what's going to happen. So thanks for everything. Carl, I see you read a lot. Economist, Business Day, MoneyWeb app, attending lots of forums. I agree with that. You get a lot of info from others. Looking at your client individual risk profiles, definitely. Community awareness groups, I love that. I think we live in such a vibrant democracy in South Africa, and it's so important for us to stay connected to our different societal environments. We actually have dual sort of setups. We have an advanced economy, and then we have emerging markets, and then we have real poverty and such different circumstances within our country, and important to stay connected to all those different ones. Great, thanks everyone for sharing. I think asking your clients is another key one that you've shared. So I'm going to just give you a couple of thoughts from my side. One of the key reports that I like to read and look at every year is the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report. I also follow a lot of their content on LinkedIn and other platforms. They do some awesome videos on YouTube as well, which just talks to some of the global risks. And it can be quite depressing, but it's also important to focus, and they often put out a lot of positive content as well of how people are looking at building urban forests, as an example, to look at addressing climate change. And that video of the individual that built, the guy in India that planted a tree a year, they also put content like that out where individuals are making a difference. So that's something, and I don't want to talk about all the risks here, but I think one of the things that I thought I'd just highlight is the fourth one that was put in this report, social cohesion erosion. So that's something that they had highlighted as one of the fourth biggest risks for the next 10 years. They published this report before we saw the unrest between Russia and Ukraine. And I think they actually highlighted something in terms of social cohesion erosion, which was actually something that they had highlighted as one of the top risks off the back of COVID pandemic, because we saw countries actually locking themselves down and not wanting people to travel there. We as South Africans were banned to travel everywhere because we discovered a new variant of the virus. And so everyone became very nationalistic. I mean, we saw Brexit and we saw a lot of other things happening in the world, the Donald Trump era, everyone just wanting to focus on their own countries. And that whole social cohesion erosion has really become a critical issue because we're not seeing a lot of collaboration anymore globally. And that is something we need to keep an eye on. So let me not focus too much on that. I've got a couple of other thoughts I want to share with you, but I do encourage you to read the report. It's really valuable, or just watch a couple of videos or look at content on it. They've got some great graphs in there as well. The Imsa risk report, you had the pleasure of hearing all about it earlier this year, earlier today. We launched it earlier this year, and so you're welcome to have a look at that one. There's some great interactive content in there as well, with some videos of individuals that we had interviewed. And then the Edelman Trust Barometer is another one that I also look at every year that gets issued. And the one thing that I thought was so powerful from the report that was issued this year is that NGOs and business CEOs are really seen as the top organizations. So business, the business sector. So they look at media, they look at NGOs, they look at business, and they look at the public sector and government. And they say NGOs and businesses are really the ones that are trusted the most. So I think it's a great opportunity for us that work for businesses or run our own businesses to actually step into that space, because there does seem to be this perception that businesses can be trusted, and societal problems businesses should lean into and actually help resolve. And specifically CEOs were cited in that report as having an important role to be aware of what's happening from a social perspective, from an environmental perspective, and actually have an opinion and also help lean in on how we solve these challenges. So that was quite interesting, and that's obviously a global report. They do a South Africa specific section as well, but it's quite interesting to see the views from all over the world. So what I wanted to go into in this sort of short time that we've got today, in talking to you about the risk manager as a strategic decision enabler, is what do you do when you enable strategic decision making? Is you help people to find different tools and to make time and space for thinking and analyzing, and you also make space for diverse perspectives. So those are the two key tools for me that I wanted to touch on. There's lots of others, but certainly that's one of the perspectives. And so I really wanted to share the idea with you of encouraging strategic analysis through scenario planning, futures thinking. There's a whole host of courses you can attend on these. Institute of Risk Management of South Africa offers them. There's Gibbs has some scenario planning sessions. I think there's futures thinking at, I think it was the Stellenbosch University or UCT. And these are sort of 1 day or 2 day sessions or even half-day sessions, but it's a really wonderful tool to help you think about what can go wrong, what are all the different elements that I'm faced with, what are the threats as well as the opportunities in my environment, and what would that potentially mean for me as an individual or for my business or for my clients, and what are the different scenarios, like if I do this, then that will happen, if I do that, then that will happen. And it helps you as a leader feel empowered in terms of what are the things you can do to reshape and direct your business outcomes as well, more proactively. And another tool that's really useful is just wargaming, which is really where you're sitting now and you're saying, and while the speaker earlier spoke about the Bitcoin environment, I saw there were some different views on whether some of the views were shared around the table. But wargaming for me is really just saying, what are the things that I need to do to just disrupt my own business? What are the things I would do to put myself out of business? And you can do that with a team of your own people within your organization, and just sit down and say, because you know your business the best, what are the things I would do to actually become more successful than myself? Because you know your own Achilles heels as well. And this is another great tool that can help you strategically plan. They often use it, unfortunately, for war, which is probably not the best time to talk about this tool now, given the Russia-Ukraine scenario. But it is really important for us to be aware of, with all of these disruptive technologies and disruptive regulatory changes, that we need to actually ourselves sit back and say, what would I do to put myself out of business, and do some scenario analysis around that. And then the scenario planning tool I just wanted to share with you. So we do at the JSE a lot of work with Mind of a Fox. They also contributed to the Institute of Risk Management report this year, and there's a lot of other individuals that also share their scenarios. Clem Santa and Chantal Ilbury pull this together. And this is really just to also look at what are the scenarios that they've put out for the world. They do a global scenario every year, then they do a South Africa one, and they can obviously do one for each different organization if you choose to work with them. And they give percentage allocations to what could happen in each one of these different scenarios. For me, what was really interesting is just to compare the results of the scenario that they did this year versus the one that they did a couple of years ago. And the 50% probability of the UV scenario, it was at only about 30% or maybe 25% a couple of years ago. So you really see how there's this divided world. There's some continued global growth, but this social cohesion erosion being a big issue and everyone just being protectionist and focusing on their own countries. So I think the challenge in that is to say, for us to then say, well, what does it mean for us? So what? What does it mean for me as an individual, for South Africa as a country? We need to be very clear about how do we then survive in that type of environment? How do we then make sure that we've got the right alliances and we understand how the global economics is going to shift. So those are the tools I wanted to share with you. So I wanted to just ask you, have you ever used tools like scenario planning and wargaming? And just drop your comments in the chat box and you can share with me if that's anything you've ever heard of or any tools you've ever used. And hopefully it is something you can consider using going forward. So Coral, scenario planning, yes. Wargaming, no. Coral, you guys are pretty much doing the wargaming in action for a lot of the guys in financial services industry. They should be looking at your tactics. Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. And then I wanted to just share some thoughts on that inclusive culture and just really having diverse perspectives around the table. Cognitive diversity for me is such an important concept and completely underestimated. And it might be a little bit weird for a risk manager to talk about that because it's more of a softer skill. And I think I loved the point that was made a little bit earlier, that it is more about EQ nowadays in the business environment than about IQ. It's so important to actually make sure that you've got the right people in the room, but also enough diverse perspectives around the table. Cultural diversity, diversity in terms of qualifications, backgrounds, industries. I've employed people in my risk management team that come from telcos and that know nothing about financial markets, but they've got a different perspective and different insights that they can share. And for me, that diversity is so critical. And then just the thought from the World Economic Forum to pull us back to reality. From a Goldilocks principle perspective, you also want to make sure that you don't have too many cooks spoiling the broth. There's sort of a sweet spot of how many people you have in the room, and the World Economic Forum has an opinion or done an analysis that it should be sort of between 14 and 19 individuals. And having worked for large organizations and some of the big banks, I can completely concur with that. If you have a room of 40 or sometimes 100 or 200 people, it just becomes so impractical and not productive. So that's some of the thoughts on that side. And then also, I thought I'd just share with you some, a stat that is very interesting. It's just that for the first time in history, companies are now employing people from 5 different generations. And I think it's because people from the silent generation have decided not to retire, or they now continue to work as consultants in the work environment. The baby boomers are still amongst us, the ones that have come out of the wartime, the Gen Xers that have been part of when we just got televisions and all of those sorts of things. And then the millennials like myself that have grown up with technology and have seen the internet really boom and the birth of social media. And then the Gen Zs that know nothing else but online and online engagements. And then the Gen Alphas like my kids that'll come into the work environment pretty soon. So I wanted to ask you a question, and you can just pop in the Q&A as well. Which generation are you from? And then I think more importantly, have you considered which generations your clients are from and your colleagues? So do you understand how to deal with each other? Do you understand the different perspectives? It's completely different approaches, completely different points of views. And I think it's really important for us to embrace that diversity and also be clear on how do we engage different ones. There's quite a number of Gen X, baby boomers, millennials, some nice diversity in this group itself. So really awesome. So I think the moral of the story here is just that we need to make sure that we understand the different dynamics we're dealing with in the room, and that you bring and you leverage that diversity, because it's important to have different perspectives and not just be closed off to say, no, well, we just need the millennials because they're the ones that can bring in and can innovate, which is complete false. We need that diversity in the room to be able to add value. So thanks for sharing that, guys. And then just some last thoughts in terms of how. So how do I practically make sure that myself as a risk manager, if you see yourself now, hopefully as a risk manager, that you know what you need to do and how you can make sure that you enable your strategic decision making, so that you can innovate and grow your business. So two tools I want to talk about is digital risk management and butterfly effect. And I know we're probably out of time, so I'm just going to quickly whiz through them. From a digital manager perspective, I just wanted to highlight that, you know, we're in a world where we've got to constantly just deal with change. So one of the things we need to do is really leverage the QA side, EQ side of ourselves, and be a change agent. Yes, we have to understand technology, but you don't have to understand the intricacies of it. It's about employing people around you. So being a people manager, having the strong technical skills around you and being able to support them so that they can deliver what's required. Need to be natural communicators. So we need to all start building our public speaking skills and have a more agile mindset and problem solver. So quite interesting, the diverse skills that this study expects us all to have. But I think it's important for us to just take one thing away from this and just say, I can't just have that technical knowledge of whatever field I'm working in. I also need to have some other elements, have some change agent characteristics, have some people management skills and communication skills, and build relationships so that I can manage better in this digital world. And the butterfly effect, I love this graphic from Deloitte, is really we have to be agile, but we also have to appreciate those traditional aspects, because that keeps us grounded in many aspects. We need to be commercially minded, but we also have to understand where technology comes in. So dependent on the situation, you have to be able to adapt to your circumstances, and not necessarily like a chameleon have to change your colors, but you have to adapt like a butterfly and move into the different spheres dependent on the situation and what's required of you. So this is my last slide. I just wanted to encourage all of you with this really bright and colorful slide, that we all be aware of those top global risks that we're facing, which is really environmental risks, social risks, governance risks. It all talks about sustainability, and that we focus on triple bottom line, people, planet. And then I love the EOH CEO has taken out the profit part, and he said we need to focus on purpose. And he's done such a beautiful turnaround at EOH Group. And then the mindset of future leaders, I just want to pick out one of those, is just that we have to be resilient. And I think us as South Africans are just so good at that. So yeah, so that's me. And I don't know if we've got any time for questions, but I'll just thank you. And I will revert back to the organizers. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nicola, for that very engaging presentation and for making it interactive with our attendees. Much appreciated. All right, over to the next speaker now. He goes by the name of Bruno de Moura Fernandes. Bruno is the head of macroeconomic research at Cohesion, and his talk today is entitled Systemic Macro Global Risks Emanating from the Russia and Ukraine Conflict. Over to you, Bruno.
Many thanks. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, we'll just today discuss the impact of the economic impact of the Russia and Ukraine conflict. I will just put a full screen right now. Okay, well, let's just do it this way. Do you see it well, or is it too small right now? Well, I guess it's okay. So good morning, everyone. So yes, well, first of all, I think that of course we have to highlight the fact that It is definitely, first of all, a humanitarian crisis, this war. But then, of course, we have to here discuss the economic consequences of this conflict, and definitely
Sorry,
here
Bruno?
what. Yes.
Can I just ask you to start your slideshow?
It hasn't worked yet.
No, not as yet. We can't see your slides. We just see the panel on the left. Could you right-hand side at the bottom next to the Zoom bar?
Here you are.
Okay, give me a second.
Well, wait a minute.
Could you just accept that?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah, so, well, as I was saying, basically, it's true. Of course, we are talking about a humanitarian crisis and so on, but then it's true, it will also have a huge and massive impact on the global economy, because, well, as you all know, we are talking about here a full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia already 1 month ago. And maybe the issue in terms of economics is that the ways to end this crisis are still way unknown, because even though we'll maybe find a peace agreement over the next weeks or months, we think that the sanctions, the economic sanctions, are here to last and to stay. And so, of course, it will have a long-term impact on the global economy and on many countries. We'll see, of course, that the most impacted country is Russia, because basically it's almost completely isolated, and probably for a long time. We expect a recession in Russia, a very deep recession. But then it's true also that Russia and also Ukraine and Belarus are major producers of commodity, and of course it will lead to higher commodity prices, but also supply chain disruptions, with, of course, Europe being on the front line of this new crisis. And we'll see why, and of course it's because of the gas too. But also I think that the key message here is to say that almost all sectors will be affected, and not only, let's say, the energy sector or the metal sector, but all sectors, because we are talking about here supply chains and so on. So, well, we'll see all that over the next 20 minutes. But first, as you may know, Russia is a major producer of oil, but also of gases. So basically, it means that the prices have been soaring since the invasion of Ukraine. And as mentioned before, there is a lot of volatility on the market, because, of course, first there is a spike, then it looks like they fall back, but then there are new sanctions and so on. So that's why we expect the prices to remain very high, but it is very hard, of course, to say, well, they will stay. For instance, the Brent price will remain at 120, or like today, or 130 or 150. It's very hard, because it will depend on the further sanctions that could be announced, for instance, today or tomorrow, because we have a G7 summit, also NATO, and also a EU summit, where new sanctions are expected to be announced. But basically, we see that prices are very high, and definitely there was already, let's say, an upward trend in commodity prices because of the recovery post-pandemic. But the issue is that here we don't think it will be temporary, and we think it will last. Though, of course, the impact will be way more important. And maybe one of the most important thing is that in Europe, you can see that the natural gas prices are very high, and the market, when you look at the future, so basically when you want to buy, for instance, gas for June, July, or August, they will remain very high. They will remain even higher if we look at the prices of today. And so what we have to think right now is that, of course, if we look at the prices that were recorded 2 or 3 weeks ago, they're lower, but it's very high still, way higher than it used to be over the last year. And so it will definitely have a huge impact in all the sectors that use this energy. And that's why also we think that Europe is very vulnerable to these consequences, let's say, because you see that natural gas is basically 26% of the primary mix of the EU, so very important. And some countries rely even more on natural gas, as Italy or Germany. And the issue is that these countries depend on Russian gas. And so it's true that it could have a major impact if Russia were to cut the gas supply to Europe on these countries, but also in the other countries, because it's true that some countries like Spain or Portugal or even France, they do not depend that much on Russian gas, but then there will be some solidarity because, of course, we are in a European Union here. I mean, during the pandemic, some common debt was launched, paid basically by Germany or thanks to Germany to fund the other countries. So we definitely know that all countries will be impacted if there was some cut in the Russian supply. So that's why it's very important. Also, at the same time, for instance, in Germany, the regulator has also already asked business associations to know, I mean, their needs in gas supply for the end of the year, because just in case there was some cut, to know where to cut, where it would be the least damaging to the economy. So we are already in this mindset, let's say, in Europe, because the gas storage are very low. So, or they can fulfill them over, let's say, the next months before the next winter, or next winter could be very complicated with major impact in activity and in many industries. But Russia and Ukraine and also Belarus are also key producers of many commodities, not only energy. You can see here in grains, but also in metals with the palladium, well, with South Africa being the other major producer. But we know that it's a key element for catalytic converters. Nickel is also used for electric vehicles, batteries, aluminium for so many packages. So basically, we are talking here about very important metals for some industries and for loads of industries. So they will then have impact in loads of sectors. Also, in terms of fertilizers, we see that Russia and Belarus are very important too. And so basically, I mean, higher prices for fertilizers will mean lower use of these fertilizers and lower yields over the next years. So also very important then to have in mind the consequences, not only in Europe, but also, for instance, in Asia or in Africa or in Brazil, for instance. And we see the impact basically of the fact that these countries are so important for some commodities that the prices have been soaring. So it means that basically it's not your issue only if you have Russia or Ukraine as your supplier. No, because as the prices have been soaring, all countries that import corn, wheat, soybeans, sunflower oil, or even then we'll see metals will be impacted because they will definitely have higher import prices. And we see that also the markets expect the wheat prices to remain very high over the next months and until the end of 2023. Of course, decreasing trend, but still way higher than over the last years. So that's why it will have a major impact on inflation and on, let's say, food inflation in almost all the world. Here the same with the metal prices. You can see that they've been soaring. So of course it will increase the costs for all the sectors that use metal. So we are here talking about construction, automotive, but also, for instance, well, the metal produces so loads of sectors. Fertilizer prices, as I already mentioned it, you can see soaring too. So definitely it will have an impact on many industries. And this is basically the key message of this slide, that all sectors will be affected. I already mentioned the agri-food sector, because of course, if you have higher cereal prices, it will mean higher meat prices, but also, for instance, higher pasta prices. Then the transport sector will also be affected because, well, it's affected by bans, but also and mostly by higher fuel prices. We know that it's around 30% of the cost of the transport sector. And we expect, to be honest, oil prices to increase further with, well, we don't know yet, but there are some rumors of embargo from Europe. And we know that it will be hard, for instance, for shale oil producers in the US to just jump in without having guarantees over around, let's say, the prices in 2 or 3 or 4 years, because for the moment, the prices are expected to decrease and to be lower in 3 or 4 years. So it's not that profitable. So it means that we are talking about here new investment, new infrastructures, And so for the moment, let's say it will take time to really see new actors jumping in. And so for the moment, we expect a cut in oil production. And so it means higher prices. So it will definitely have a huge impact on the transport sector. Chemical industry, as I mentioned, they will be impacted. And the automotive sector also, that is very important in South Africa, because we have basically, but let's say we already had input shortages, for instance, with the semiconductors. And we know that, for instance, Ukraine is a major producer of some gases that are used to build the semiconductors, the neon gas. And so also we can expect, let's say, these shortages to bite even further for the automotive industry. And also we know that in times of uncertainty, what the consumers do most of the time is to postpone the spend in durable goods. So we know that for the automotive industry, let's say they're not out of the woods after these 2 years, very complicated during the pandemic. But we can also mention all the energy intensive industries like the paper one, for instance, or the plastic one, because of course, once again, the energy prices will remain high for a long time. And so all these industries that use energy will also be affected. So you see basically very few sectors will be spared, maybe the pharmaceutical one, maybe the ICT one, but very few of them. And let's say that the other adverse factor that has emerged over the last days or weeks is, let's say, the rebound of the COVID cases in China. Of course, we are talking about only 2,000 cases a day, so it's very low if we compare with the rest of the world. But as we know that China has a zero COVID policy, zero COVID strategy, it means that when you have, for instance, 30 or 40 cases in a town of 10 million people, they just lock the town. So they just implemented the lockdown, for instance, in Shanghai, in Shenzhen. In Shenzhen now, after a week, it has been lifted a bit. But for instance, also in Shenyang, I don't know if you have heard about Shenyang, but it's a 9 million people town. So major town, industrial town. And so then it has an impact on the supply chains. Of course, and you can see that in the freight on stationary ships, for instance, that there was some easing over the last months, but right now we see a new spike, a rebound. So of course, once again, we have more congestioning at the ports, and so more complicated. Once again, we are not talking about only one factor, but let's say multiple factors that are just being added one after the others. And then when we try to estimate the impact on activity of this, let's say, higher commodity prices, higher energy prices, and all of these supply chain disruptions, maybe just when we have a look at the, let's say, at the history, we just look back a bit to try to understand where we are if we compare with other years. And we can definitely see that every time we had such a high energy bill, the energy bill, it's coal, oil, and natural gas prices on the GDP, you can definitely see that every time there was a sharp deceleration in activity, because when you have such a high energy bill, it means that you have to destroy some demand, and so that some industries have to suspend their production. And for instance, it's already what we've seen in Europe with loads of chemical industries, but also automotive industries, metal industries have already started to suspend for some days production because it's not profitable anymore to produce 24 hours. So this is why we can expect definitely a sharp slowdown in activity at a global level and not only in Europe. But as I said, Europe, once again, is at the front line. Why? Because the energy bill is even higher because of the depreciation of the euro. And it's what you can see here, because the last time, let's say, that the prices, the oil prices were so high, the euro was very strong against the dollar, 130, 140. Right now it's 110. And you can see definitely that it has never been higher. The oil bill for Europe has never been higher when you pay in euros. So that's why also the import inflation will be absolutely huge for the European countries. And that's why here I show you first the GDP growth forecast that were, of course, revised down because of the conflict in Europe. You can see that everyone is losing around 1.3, 1.2 GDP points. And what are the transmission channels? Because I think it's very important to really identify the multiple channels, because it's not only one channel. It's first because higher inflation will mean lower income for the consumer. So let's say lower private consumption, but also lower external trade because of the supply chain disruptions. Also lower business investment because the profitability will be lowered by the higher costs, but also because of this, let's say, business sentiment that in this uncertain environment is quite low. And the latest business surveys has definitely shown a decreasing and a falling actually economic sentiment. And so that's why for the moment we can expect this kind of 1 point percentage of activity. But let's say if there is a complete halt of gas imports from Russia, then as I mentioned, you have to cut the activity in loads of sectors. So then we are talking about here a very likely recession in Europe, and then with all the spillovers in the rest of the world. And that's why then we want to show that also the rest of the world, that no region will be spared, because I mean, of course, few countries depend a lot on Russia for their exports or even their imports. We are talking about here very few, a couple of countries. But what we have to think is that Russia is just crucial for some countries for certain raw materials, and for instance for fertilizers in Brazil, but also for some cereals in Indonesia, Thailand, as I mentioned, Turkey or Egypt, also for some metals, for instance, in Turkey. And so basically it means that these countries are very vulnerable to Russian exports for these products, but also that all the countries that import the key commodities, then it means that they will just have to pay a higher bill, a way higher bill. So then basically all countries will suffer imported inflation, if not supply disruptions. And let's say that this negative impact could be even higher because of the fact that the Fed is now tightening, will tighten a lot. We are expecting 8 hikes this year, so sharp tightening. So it will mean that basically if you don't tighten your monetary policy too, you will have a sharp depreciation of your currency that will lead to higher import inflation. So that's why also all countries will have to tighten their policy. That will affect further the activity. And of course, then you also have the question of slower growth in Europe or in the US, then lower demand for the rest of the world. So second round impact. So multiple factors that will then explain why, let's say, for the moment, it looks like a very European conflict, let's say, but then it will definitely, I mean, it's very likely to then just spread to the rest of the world. Because once again, as we all trade, I mean, the dependency, the interdependency between all the countries is really high at a global level because of these supply chains and so on. So here, just the last slide, it's our revisions to our GDP growth forecast for 2022, where you can see definitely that in dark blue are the most affected countries, Russia, Ukraine, also then the Baltics countries, Slovakia, also Tajikistan, for instance, because they heavily depend on remittances from the workers that are working in Russia. Around 30% of GDP of these countries are from the remittances from Russia. Then you definitely have the rest of Europe that will also be heavily impacted. But also, as you can see, we are in light blue in almost all the rest of the world, because once again, because of all this impact I've mentioned before, all these channels, let's say, with very few countries that could benefit from these higher commodity prices. We are here talking about the Middle East countries, the Gulf countries, and very few countries in Africa, because once again, when we look at that, of course, some commodity prices have increased, so it could benefit. For instance, the higher metal prices could benefit for South Africa. But then, as you import most of your oil or wet, for instance, then the bill, let's say, more than offset the positive impact of the rise in other commodity prices. So that's what we are trying to assess. But also, let's be honest, I mean, there is a lot of volatility. The environment is very unstable. New sanctions are almost every day announced. So of course, it's just a first assessment, and then we definitely don't know when it will stop, how it will end, and so we always have every day almost to update this forecast, this estimate. But what we know definitely is that there will be a general global slowdown because of, let's say, of this conflict. Many thanks for your attention, and I know if you have any question.
Thank you so much, Bruno, for that insightful presentation. Well, can you believe we are down to our very last speaker for the session? Our next speaker now is Tony McCann. Tony is a professional trial runner, coach, and nutritionist. Tony is going to be sharing with us about finding your people and the value of a team. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm currently sitting in the Canary Islands, so a little bit behind you guys, but yeah, super happy to be here. Thank you so much for letting me speak. Very different to, I think, what everyone else has been speaking to, but hopefully I can add some value to your day. So I'm just going to quickly present my screen. Give me 2 seconds. Oh. Oh, goodness. Can you see that? Sorry, I'm just going to re-share that. Let's make sure that I'm on the right one. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. I hope everyone can see that. So yeah, today I'm going to be speaking about finding your people and kind of my journey to become the person I am today and how that kind of has happened. So I'm just going to start with a bit of a quote from today that kind of resonates really well with me. So the quote is, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out the strong man, how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming, but does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." So this quote was, this quote is by Theodore Roosevelt, and I really like this quote. I think it speaks to courage. It speaks to being vulnerable. It speaks to taking risks. I think in taking risks and being vulnerable and stepping out of your comfort zone, that's where creativity comes in. That's where innovation happens. And I think that's, it's been spoken to a number of times today already, that creativity and innovation are what we need to do to move businesses forward, but also just in personal everyday lives. I would like to add to this quote though, because I think that there can be no victory without having people in your corner, having the courage to step into the arena, to be vulnerable and to accept that failure is an option in everyday life. It takes more than just being an individual. It requires having a people. It requires having a team, and having people around you who support and encourage you, but who also give you a kick up the butt when you need it. So just moving on, let's take it back to a little bit about me. So this is me. This is me growing up. I grew up, I guess, as my dad's little boy. We grew up in Swaziland, and we did all the outdoor things. We went fishing, we rode motorbikes, we lived a very wholesome natural life. Later on, we moved back to Durban, where I grew up, and I participated in all the sports. You know, you name it, I did it. I ran, I played cricket, I played hockey, played netball, and this kind of continued all throughout my schooling career. I stopped running in high school. I decided that running wasn't for me and preferred, again, taking on team sports. So I played a lot of hockey up until provincial and eventually making a national teams as well. And that was kind of my introduction to sport, my sporting background. I was always very sporty. I've always been a very active person, but never in my life did I think that making sport would be an option for me as a professional career. Since then, I've had many successes, which I'll just quickly briefly speak to. I've won the Untitled African Trail Run, which Carl will attest is quite a beautiful place. I've won that. I've had the privilege of running that 3 times, 2 of which I've won. I hold the South African record for the One Direction, and I have managed to podium for every race, every time that I've run that race. I've also raced the Whale Trail in the De Hoop Nature Reserve, which is an incredible place. Again, another spectacular piece of coastline that we have in South Africa. Most recently, I ran the Trans-Gran Canaria race, which is part of the Spartan Trail World Series. That was in the Canary Islands 2 weeks ago on Gran Canaria, and I was kind of blown away by my own performance. I ended up coming second there to a very talented young runner as well. So that was a great start to my season for 2022. But I think just to go back to kind of that defining moment, I think there's always a point in our lives where something happens that defines who you are. It's a moment that's quite pivotal in your lives. And mine definitely came at the Otter African Trail Run in 2018. It was the year that the Golden Trail National Series was coming to town. And the series it attracts the top athletes, trail runners from around the world. So this year, they brought with them the top 10 male and female athletes from around the world to race along the piece of coastline from Nature's Valley to Storms River. So for me, I knew entering this race at the time was going to be a challenge. I have an adversity to competing amongst mediocrity. I don't like being the best in a mediocre pool of people, and I think that's kind of what being a competitive person is about. So you always put yourself up against the best. It was my first attempt at marathon distance, which is 42 kilometers. And on paper, I had no chance in a race like this, zero, not a chance. I was on no one's radar, not even my own. Otter is an interesting race in that it, in order to start the race with the lead group, you have to run a prologue, which seeds every runner. And if you know the Otter Trail Run or the Otter Hiking Trail, you'll know that a large portion of it is super technical. It's 99% single track trail that's up and down and lots of rocks and roots and quite slippery. So splitting up the group from their masses is quite important here. Somehow, I don't know how, I managed to run the fastest time at the prologue. I think I was so determined to make my mark and to be part of that lead Abangeni group that I really pushed myself on the prologue day. But this came with a bit of a bad rep. Most people who won the prologue in previous years generally blew on race day, kind of hitting the rhetorical wall and never really placed anywhere near the top. So if I wasn't nervous before, now I was extremely nervous because I had this kind of looming cloud of disaster hanging over my head. Anyway, I somehow managed to cling to a third position. I led the race for a little bit of the way, probably about the first 15 kilometers. And I was passed by 2 amazing female runners who I look up to immensely and who I'm now actually lucky enough to call teammates, Holly Page and Ruth Craft. These are just some of the images from that day. It is and probably still will be always one of the highlights of my career. This underdog story led to some great opportunities. It allowed me to run my international debut race at the Zagama Trail Run in the Basque region of Spain in 2019. The Golden Trail series invited me to take part in their race tour throughout Europe that year. And being a newbie to the sport, I knew nothing, I knew no one, but I was super excited to be part of this. So I tootled off to Spain completely on my own to experience this Basque fever that everyone had spoken about. If you know Zagama Azcori, it's a tiny town, it's probably 200 people, but the entire community from the surrounding area comes out on the day to climb a mountain and support everyone. You can see them kind of lining the trail up the side of the mountain there. The energy is electric. They cheer you all the way to the top, and you get to the top of the mountain and you're completely broken because you've pushed yourself way harder than you should have to get to the top. But the energy that you just feed off of the energy of the people when they're cheering you up there. Needless to say, this race destroyed me. I went in completely underprepared to a torn ankle ligament, which I'm sorry if you're a bit squeamish, but that was my ankle a month before the race. So I was completely underprepared. 43 kilometers with almost 3,000 meters of vertical ascent. Yeah, I was completely ignorant about what I was getting into, and it showed. But I love this race. And if I wasn't hooked on trail running before and making this a profession, I now knew that this was what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be good at. It's a beautiful way to explore the world on your feet. Later that year, I got to spend some time in Chamonix in France for the Marathon du Mont Blanc, another 43-kilometer race, part of the Golden Trail World Series. Chamonix has since captured my heart in a way that nowhere else has. It's been dubbed the Disneyland for outdoor enthusiasts, and it truly is a special place. The toughest lesson I think I learned that year was on my final stop on the Golden Trail World Series tour at the Dolomites Skyrun. It's a 21-kilometer race, so you would think relatively easy, but it was 1,700 meters of vertical gain and then a steep scree drop back down to the start. Super fun race, super technical, and it introduced me to the amazing Dolomites in Italy, another place that is truly spectacular. Leading up to this race, I'd spent a large portion of time alone. I was entirely self-supported over that year. I had no family, I had no friends there to support me. My sponsors at the time were not a big enough brand to have a team support there, so I was completely alone. I had no one to discuss race tactics, splits, route profiles, no one to give you that boost of confidence when kind of the race nerves take over. I can't really stress, and it sounds melodramatic, but I can't stress how much energy you waste fretting about the small race logistics. How you'll get to the start, will you get at aid stations, will you get a drop bag at the end? Logistically, racing can be a nightmare, and adding on top of this, the self-doubt and the nerves that come with racing, especially in races of such high prestige, it's exhausting, it truly is. Again, it all sounds super dramatic. It's just a run, right? It's a run up a mountain, you should just have fun. But when you've spent so many hours training and prepping, flying around the world, and just being a naturally competitive person, the pressure that you put on yourself and that you feel is immense. My coach at the time was there. And again, you're probably thinking, well, there's your support, that's your system of support. But unfortunately, at the time, my coach was also one of my competitors. So not quite in my corner. She was more in her own arena. She had stepped up in her own corner. And understandably, she was vying for, or we were both vying for that kind of lone spot as South Africa's top female trail runner. Since then, thankfully, that pool of athletes has grown and there's definitely more space for all of us. But based on all of this, I kind of went into that race already defeated and exhausted. And it showed in my performance, or lack thereof. Mountain running, as much as it's a mental as much as it's a physical battle, it's just as much a mental battle. And you need to have capacity to hurt and to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And on that day, I was not ready or able to fight that mental battle. Following this race, I went home deflated. The person who should have had my back, my coach, kind of blamed me for our failing relationship and essentially broke up with me. And this was a tough pill to swallow. I blamed myself and I returned home questioning my ability and whether I was cut out for this path that I'd chosen. Too independent to ask for help. As much as I can blame my coach for not being in my corner or my sponsors at the time for not providing the emotional support or any number of people for the challenges that I faced, at the end of the day, I needed to have the courage to reach out and ask for help, but also to have the insight and self-understanding and compassion that I was in need of help. I think it's so often seen as weakness to need help, but it's not. So this is where I come to finding your people. I wrote this a little while ago on my social media page, and scrolling through in preparation for this presentation, I kind of came across it again. And I thought it was quite relevant, so I'm going to read it. It says, running is hard. It tests, it pushes and challenges. It forces you to dig deep. It can be frustrating more often than not. But it's also empowering, rewarding. It fuels self-awareness and growth. But my best part, the thing that makes running amazing, and it is the incredible community, the support and the friends that I've made through it. I kind of love this quote, and I feel like Brene Brown, she's one of my idols, but I feel like Brene Brown when I read this quote because I'm like, oh, it's going to make me famous, but it's not. But anyway, I really enjoy it because I think you can replace running with anything in this situation. You know, it could be being a mom, being a parent is hard. It tests, it pushes, it challenges. Working in the banking industry or business, you know, it's hard. It forces you to dig deep. It's frustrating, but it's also empowering and rewarding. And I think, you know, the focus on this is the importance on who you surround yourself with. It's the people, it's the community. And as much as, you know, when things get tough, when the going gets tough, it's not weakness or failure, but it's the vulnerability to ask for help. And the unity is a segue to innovation and creativity and triumph. And I think that's the thing that always keeps me coming back, you know, despite how hard this profession is that I've taken on, and any profession really, is, you know, the people that you surround yourself with. Running people, I don't know if any of you are runners, but they're crazy people, absolutely crazy. I mean, they'll head out at sparrow's fart in the morning to go and have a coffee with you on the mountaintop, or they'll wake up at the crack of dawn for hill reps and interval sessions, and they'll hang around for coffee afterwards or have a beer with you after your run in the evening. It's easy to forget how great an impact this community has. Last year, I spent most of my time racing in Europe, and I competed in some small events and some pretty large events. But the race that really stands out to me was the Cape Town Trail Marathon. Being able to round out my season on home turf on Table Mountain, which is basically my backyard, and hearing people, you know, shout your name and cheer you on, having my sister there running next to me and cheering alongside me, and being greeted at the end with faces and friends of people I knew. You know, these are the memories that I cherish the most. Recently, I've also had the privilege of joining the Adidas Terex One team. This move was really not an easy one. My previous team treated me well and provided me with a platform that I needed to grow. And I believe a lot in authenticity and loyalty. But at the end of the day, I needed to choose the path that would help me take the next step to my career. And this meant making a move with no guarantee of success, but one that promised a team and growth through learning. I learned a lot. I have learned a lot. I'm currently sitting, as I said, in the Canary Islands on a team camp with these incredible athletes. I've made so many great friends through this. And truly, you know, as much as it sounds cliche, we truly are a one team. I've never really felt more inspired by a group of people or felt as quickly at home. As much as running's an individual sport, and trail running more so, solo time in the mountains, the solace, the quiet meditative quality and focus required to navigate the trails. I think that's what draws so many people in. But what makes the Adidas team so special is the fact that there are no egos involved. The team is made up of some of the top trail runners in the world over various distances, and yet each person's victories are celebrated equally, and each person's failures are supported. The sport is one of so many variables, and we are under no influence, under no illusion that every time we step to the start line, we'll walk away having achieved our goals. And, being competitive, all of us, we always step up to win. But, whether I win or my teammate wins, at the end of the day, it's a win for us all. Looking back now from where I started, I admire the determination I had in the early days of my running career. And I can appreciate what I achieved in a very short space of time without much support. But this success is always going to be short-lived. You can't run through life alone. More recently, I admire my courage and vulnerability to accept that I needed help and to step into an arena where there's no guarantee of success. In fact, there's very small chance of individual success. But regardless of my personal achievements, I've chosen to step in and to step into an arena where there are people around me who are stepping into. We've all chosen to dare greatly. And at the end of the day, all flourishing is mutual. Thank you. That's me. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But otherwise, thank you for having me, and I hope you have a beautiful day.
Thank you so much, Tony, for that very inspirational talk. Really did enjoy it, and what a great way to end the session. And just like that, we have reached the end of our session. We do hope that you enjoyed it and took all of the insights with you. A huge thank you once again to our headline sponsor, Easy Equities, for making this session possible, as well as our event partners, the IISA, who is also our CPD partner, and our media partner, Cover Magazine. A huge thank you to all of our speakers for making it time and availing yourself to share your insights. We do appreciate it. And of course, the MVPs, a huge thank you to all of our attendees for joining this session once again. We do appreciate it. I'm told we had over 1,000 attendees once again. So a huge shout out to all of our attendees for your continued support of InsureTalk. A reminder once again that InsureTalk21 will be taking place on the 14th of April. So do the right thing and register. We have posted the link in the chat. So do head on over to the chat to register yourself for that session. All right, and as I always do, I'm going to leave you with a quote that is befitting of today's theme. And the quote is, "Don't be afraid to fail, be afraid not to try." And that's one of my favorite quotes. The author is unknown. From myself, Untitled and the CN&CO events team, it's been an absolute pleasure. Do stay safe. See you at InsureTalk21.